1,000 years ago, a barbarian made a deal with the angels to save his fallen tribe. He fought countless demons until the demon king sealed him in stone. When he finally awakens, the war is over. But the demons are still here, hiding in modern-day Korea. Now, the strongest warrior from the Middle Ages has one last battle to finish. If he can survive a world where punching people isn't socially acceptable, can an ancient barbarian finally defeat the demon who stole everything from him? So what happens when a legendary demon-slaying barbarian gets dropped into modern society? Let's just say, the culture shock is going to hurt everyone. Once upon a time, a single barbarian fought an army of 80,000 demons, shackles that bound his body tightly, silence that prevented him from even screaming, weakening that nullified his defenses, a curse that reduced his physical stats, a cleavage that sliced the entire body into pieces. And to top it all off, something only greater demons could do, the ultimate curse, instant death. Just when the barbarian Wolfgang seemed defeated, a demon approached him. Seeing that he was no longer moving, he turned his back on him, certain that he was dead, but he was still alive. How could he, in the body of a mere mortal, and even alone, fight demons? The first reason is those who forced him into this war between saints and demons. Wolfgang made a contract with angels, and they granted him special abilities. For example, the archangel Seraph granted him the ability to understand any language, and when he faced his next opponent, a skeleton, he could already understand what he was saying about him. He called him crazy and uncouth, which made him indignant, and the skeleton asked, "Isn't he right? How can a sane person fight demons?" He attacked him. MC dodged and rushed in, crushing his skull with his heavy weapon. This demon was right. He had long since lost his mind, and they were to blame. With each battle, he maintained victory, and about 14,000 demons remained. The abilities received from the angels were many. They spared no effort to support him, while he alone waged war against the demons. And the most useful among them was the ability from the fallen angel Uriel. When he clashed in another battle, the demons severed his limbs and ordered him to surrender. But Wolfgang was not so simple. Uriel gave him the ability to regenerate. Even if he loses his limbs, they will regenerate, and even if his head is cut off, a new one will immediately grow in its place. Immediately after such serious injuries, Wolfgang was ready to go into battle. A man who will never die, and the demons that this man exterminates one after another. By this point, even demons should be curious about who is truly a demon and who is a human. It's too late for regrets. They shouldn't have messed with Wolfgang in the first place. When about 11,000 demons remained, they gathered in one place to confront him. It was the perfect place to sever his connection with the angels. Even knowing it was a trap, he had no choice but to come. The reason he made a contract with the angels and entered this war between saints and demons was because he wanted to finish off the demon who took the lives of his family. This is where Devil House was hiding. The plan to lure him here was also surely his ploy, and it worked. Here, angels' blessings don't work, which means his wounds won't heal, and his chances of dying are much higher. But even after receiving dozens of arrows to the chest, he stood firmly on his feet. The demon exclaimed that no matter how he squirmed, he was only a human. The barbarian smirked, saying he was talking too much, and the demon angrily called him a savage and summoned his servants, ordering them to stop this idiot. MC smiled. This was just what he was waiting for. There was a second reason why a person is able to stand against demons alone. He existed, having surpassed the human limit. The strongest warrior who becomes stronger with each battle. He is one of those who can single-handedly defeat an entire army of the empire. This is what it means to be a barbarian. This is his true essence. He killed almost everyone in the castle. Only one remained, that same demon. He pointed his sword at him, and he, dumbfounded, said that it was incredible. Having failed to cope with one person, the demons were completely exterminated. Wolfgang noticed that everyone was saying the same thing, and he was so sick of it, but this was the last time. The fall of the demons was near, and his revenge must end there. Now he would return to his homeland, Germany, and his world, which they had destroyed, would return, and he would rebuild everything anew. He would sail the stormy seas, slaughter monsters, and search for rare treasures. He would once again become the barbarian he once was. His sworn enemy had said that they, the demons, would never fall at the hands of worthless people like him, after which he pierced his own body with his hand and asked, does he think choosing death himself is the best option? But that still wouldn't change the future that awaited them. Besides, it didn't fit with the ending of his revenge. He would never let him do it himself. But the demon had no intention of dying. He activated an ancient spell, absolute petrification, and a magic circle appeared under the barbarian's feet. He froze in place, but not himself. He simply couldn't move. His legs turned to stone, and the rest of his body gradually began to turn to stone. The angels were confused by what was happening. They despised the surviving demon and were confused by the reality of the ancient spell. When the stone reached his head, he no longer felt his body or heard anything. Even his vision began to blur. But before he went completely blind, he saw this demon running and vowed to kill him and bring back his family. But to do this, he had to stop. Everything went dark before his eyes, and he fell asleep for many years. When he woke up, he saw a strange guy in front of him, who looked at him with admiration and said what a cool statue it was. It looked just like it was alive. MC, meanwhile, wondered what he was even talking about. He sees this man, Why does he even hear his voice? The guide called out to the guy and said that she told him not to leave the group during the excursion. Finally feeling his body, Wolfgang realized that the curse had broken and grabbed the guy by the head, telling him to get out of the way. He pushed him aside. He flew into a stone with great force and fell unconscious, which scared the rest of the people and made them scream. MC noted that this was such a noisy place, and there were only people around. He remembered that demon. Now that he could move, he would be able to find him. He opened the status window, and what he saw shocked him. There were almost 1,000,000 remaining demons. Some hunters had also appeared. There were 1,300,000 of them, and one single barbarian, himself. He thought, what kind of hunters are these? And why was he left all alone among the barbarians again? He looked around. Strange people surrounded him. He glanced at that guy and thought, is this all because of this? And what's all this fuss about over one man thrown into the wall? He fell apart as soon as he hit the wall, and the others started panicking because of this weakling. They're all weaklings. One of those strange people showed him his ID and said his name was Kim Jin-sok, a security guard for the first floor of the Black Dungeon from the Dark Silver Guild. He'd heard rumors that he'd caused trouble on their territory, so he should prove his identity. Wolfgang didn't understand what he was talking about at all, and the man said that while he was asking nicely, he'd better obey silently. If he was a hunter, a license would do too. But MC didn't stand on ceremony with him. He grabbed him by the neck and lifted him up, asking, did he just say that he was going to subdue him? He should listen carefully. He wasn't someone who could be subdued. Before he could finish him off, someone's excited voice called out to him. After catching her breath, the girl asked, his name is Wolfgang de Kref, isn't it? He immediately let go of the guy and approached her, asking how she knew his name. She became nervous under the barbarian's cold gaze and said that her name was Kan Yerin, and that she worked at the Seoul branch of the South Korean Hunters Association. If he didn't mind, she would like to go somewhere else to talk. He wanted to ask why he should go somewhere, and at that moment his stomach growled loudly, and she smiled broadly, promising to provide him with food and a place to rest if he came with her. They left the dungeon through the portal. MC immediately noticed how much the world had changed, and asked her where they were going. She told him that first, they would go to the Hunters Association, where they could talk alone. He asked what a hunter was in the modern sense, and she explained that it was the name for those trained to fight otherworldly monsters and demons sent through portals. The Hunter Association is a private military organization that controls them. They got into the car, and she continued telling him everything from there. Demons, individually classified as A rank or higher, are handled by government agencies, while they usually deal with lower-ranked monsters. They also receive support from the government to find and train new hunters. He was also part of their hunter search project. They got out of the car and she continued, they thought he was just a statue until they discovered that he was actually a warrior petrified by a curse. There aren't many S-rank hunters capable of fighting demons. Meanwhile, the number of demons entering through the portal continues to grow. When she found him petrified, an idea occurred to her. She suddenly fell silent. He turned to her to check what was the matter and saw how sad she looked. They went up to her office. After a while, they brought him an appetizing-looking flatbread, the aroma of which tempted him. Yeren said it was called pizza. He must be dying of hunger, so let him eat. It must be delicious. In any case, to break the petrification curse, they brought in hunters with healing abilities. But it was such a powerful demonic curse that it couldn't be removed after 1 or 2 attempts. Wolfgang tried the first slice of pizza, took 3 more, and remarked that it was incredibly delicious. How do they, cunning idiots, manage to make food so tasty? He pointed to the bottle on the table and asked, what the hell is that? She told him it was a sweet soda. It tasted even better if you wash it down with pizza. He took the first sips. She asked him how it tasted, and suddenly all the soda flew into her face. He just spat it out because he was scared. For a second he thought it hit his throat, but it was cool, refreshing, and also absolutely delicious. She calmly wiped her face with a towel and said that she was glad that he liked everything. While he was eating, he didn't mind if she asked him a few questions. He noticed that the current era was different from the one he lived in, right? He confirmed it. The views he saw from that cart were more completely alien to him. Yeren said that they call a period of 100 years a century. Now they live in the 21st century. Does he by any chance know what year of their era it was when he lived? He said that he had no idea what an era was, and she asked if maybe he knew his year of birth. He thought for a moment and told her that he had been told that 1,000 years had passed since Romulus founded Rome. Upon hearing this, she jumped up excitedly from her seat and exclaimed that she knew it. Her theory was correct. He was from the Middle Ages, and they were in the 21st century now. She couldn't believe that she was talking to someone from the Middle Ages. As a hunter-archaeologist, she was absolutely delighted. He said that he had no idea what she was talking about, and that she should just bring him another pizza. After eating a few boxes and drinking a few bottles, MC finally got his fill and said, since demons appear here too, she might know it. Can she tell him where to find a jerk named Devil House? She asked what it was, and he told her that it was the name of the one who turned him to stone. She took out her phone and asked him to wait a bit. Maybe they would find out about him if she checked the hunter's gallery. He looked at the rectangular thing in her hands and noted that they, humans, do all sorts of strange things. Meanwhile, Yaren typed the name into a search engine and said that they had no information. Is he sure that Devil House is a monster? He told her that it was a demon, the guy he fought with the last time before he put him down. Tears welled up in his eyes. He said that when he got rid of it, he would return to Germany to his family. Yaren said that he needed to clearly understand the situation. The Germany he knew had already fallen. He was shocked by this news. She told him that more than 1,000 years had passed since the era in which he lived. This land is now ruled by a country called Norway. He clarified, 1,000 years means that the seasons have changed 1,000 times? She confirmed this and said that everything from his time remained only in history. He was absolutely furious. He punched the nearest wall, punching a hole in it, and vowed to bring his family back. Yaren, confused, asked how he would look for them since so many years had passed, and he answered that he would definitely be able to bring them back, because that was the condition of the contract. Can she find that demon for him? She told him that if he was a demon and still active, then she would definitely be able to find him, and he asked her to do so. She waited for him to wake up because she had a specific goal, right? He will cooperate and support her goals as much as possible. His condition is simple. She must do everything possible to find Devil House. They went down to the first floor, and she said that since he currently does not have citizenship in South Korea or any other country, it is difficult for him to kill freely in this era. However, there is one way. He just needs to get a hunter's license. Luckily, it seems he already meets the requirements for it. Wolfgang remarked that they lived a rather difficult life. They went out to the car, and she climbed inside, saying that being a hunter had many advantages. He would receive housing support depending on his rank, and also a scholarship. He clarified that by scholarship she meant money. She said that if he passed the hunter entrance exam today, he would receive a whopping 10 million won. She realized that he wouldn't understand the value of that money anyway, and said there was something even better. If he was lucky during the hunter exam, he could make a contract with the constellations. These are guardian deities of the stars. They favor talented individuals, watch over them, and don't hesitate to support their endeavors. MC said he knew about angels, but this was the first he'd heard of constellations, and she noted that this made sense, since they only started appearing 15 years ago. They arrived at the exam site. When they entered, Wolfgang immediately noticed how crowded it was and asked, "Are they all trying to become hunters?" Yaren said that today was the day when students of the Hunter Academy, having reached adulthood, took the promotion exam. They walked to the center of the arena, where a testing wall stood on the stage, imbued with the power of Leonidas I, the constellation of the spear and shield. If he hit it and scored more than 500 points, he would pass the test. He remarked that the wall looked like it would fly off with just one simple touch, and Yaren led him to the registration desk. She asked the man his name, and he reminded her that foreigners without a passport needed a guarantor to take the exam. She said she had a hunter-archaeologist license. Would that work as a guarantee? He confirmed it and asked her to simply show him the license and sign the bond, while MC noticed a guy in a strange suit and asked what he was holding. Yaren told him that this was the spear of the Leonidas constellation. It looked like the exam was about to begin. As soon as they placed the spear in the structure in front of the wall, Lord Leonidas's power would flow into the testing wall. The guy walked onto the stage, placed the spear in the bowl, and a glow began to emanate from it. Sparks fell on the wall, and it itself began to glow, and Wolfgang noted that they really made a lot of noise with this. The examiner warned that the strength assessment was beginning. MC frowned, as he felt a familiar aura. Several messages from the constellation appeared on the wall. He had discovered an intriguing person and was urging this person to quickly pass the test. Seeing this, the examinees were very surprised and wondered who had attracted the constellation's attention. The examiner called the first candidate, Go Yun, from the Blue Dragon family. She proudly walked onto the stage, and the others began to discuss her. Isn't the Blue Dragon a family famous for its hunters? It is the family led by Hunter Go Sonen, a master spearman. As soon as she approached the wall, she activated the aura of the temporary constellation, and the other examinees admired her. The Blue Dragon truly lived up to its name. The examiner told his colleague that it was logical that the constellation's thirst had appeared on the testing ground. At this rate, they could see a true contractor among the students today, not just a temporary one. Gathering all her strength into a fist, the girl punched the wall. Her strength was measured at 1,254 units. Wolfgang, unaware of the system of measurement, asked the girl if she had done well, to which she replied, at this level, she was on par with an active hunter. Such a score is rare in a promotion exam. Yuna smirked, confident that she was the candidate Leonidas was looking for, but the constellation shouted for them to quickly bring the next student. This left her in shock, after which her temporary constellation, the Blue Rose Spearman, became disillusioned with her skills and terminated her contract. She was shocked and couldn't believe what was happening, and then the next candidate came on stage and told her not to stand there like an idiot. Why would the constellation lust after her when he was here? She should be grateful that such a weakling was even given a temporary contract. It seemed that even this temporary contract was now terminated. It was Kim Jin-woo. Everyone present immediately recognized him and said that it was obvious that Go Yuno wasn't the candidate. The constellation Descendant of the Barbarian bestowed its power on Jin, and it increased significantly. He clenched his fist and swung, thinking that while he was here, no one else could be the main character. This constellation's lust was directed at him. He swiped at the wall, a shockwave rippled through the entire hall, and one of the examiners exclaimed, "This can't be right. Is this really the level of a student taking the promotion exam?" His strength was measured at 2,039 units, and everyone was surprised and certain that he was the candidate. The examiner asked, "Isn't 200 points equivalent to a C rank even among active hunters? But this guy might be even stronger than him." Jinwoo looked at the wall and turned to the constellation, asking, "Is this enough to be the hero he was looking for?" But Leonidas, on the contrary, thundered in anger, causing the guy to fall to his knees in shock and ask, "Why?" He turned to the Descendant of the Barbarian and asked, "What happened?" He had spoken so loudly before, and Leonidas would be pleased. The Descendant of the Barbarian replied that he was a hero who had killed 1,000 demons, and he exclaimed, "It doesn't matter how many he killed. What's going on?" It was the MC's turn. He went up on stage and told the guy to get lost. He wasn't the one they were looking for. Seeing the old man, he said that today wasn't his day to take the exam. If he had to crawl here, at least let him wait his turn. Wolfgang asked in response, "Isn't his turn already over? Let him leave while he's still nice." He was holding back with all his might because he was asked. Jinwoo roughly grabbed his hand and asked if his words sounded like a joke to him. The MC threw his hand away, looked at Yeren, who shook her head, asking him not to do this, and held back. He asked the guy, was the constellation dwelling within him, called the Descendant of the Barbarian? Jinwoo told him to apologize immediately for calling him a mere constellation, then rudely poked him in the chest several times and said that no matter how obscure the Descendant of the Barbarian was, due to his late arrival, he was not someone such trash as himself could disrespect. He warned him that if he showed off just because he thought he was strong, the constellation would become angry and punish him. Wolfgang suggested that he hear this from the constellation directly, after which he said, "His name is Wolfgang de Crayf. If he really is the Descendant of the Barbarian, he should know his name." Immediately after these words, a glow appeared above Jinwoo, and the Descendant of the Barbarian himself condescended to him, surprising everyone. The Descendant of the Barbarians called Wolfgang a hero and greeted him respectfully, and he asked if he was angry that he belittled him by calling him a constellation without honorifics. The constellation replied that this was not the case at all. Like someone who borrows the barbarian's power, it is merely the ignorance of a child who could not recognize Lord Wolfgang. He asks him to forgive the boy, as he acted out of ignorance. MC promised to make an exception and forgive him, but the fact is that this child is abusing his power. Shouldn't appropriate measures be taken? The Descendant of the Barbarians replied that this had already been his intention. After that, he left. Jinwoo's body fell, and the Descendant of the Barbarian directed his anger at him and broke the contract with him and the rest of his family. Yeren was greatly surprised and thought, "What is going on? How incredible is this person, that the constellation personally acted like this?" While the examiners were examining Jinwoo, Wolfgang turned to Leonidas and said that he needed to do something, so he would have to use a little strength. He can handle it, right? The spear trembled. The system informed him that the constellation was deeply touched by the hero's appearance and was ablaze with Spartan will. MC thanked him, saying he liked his spirit. Since he had raised his momentum, he should show his too. After that, he released his power. The hunters who sensed it felt incredible pressure, and Yeren stared at Wolfgang in shock, thinking that this wasn't a hunter's exam, but as if Wolfgang were testing Leonidas, the constellation of spear and shield. The wall went dark, the spear trembled, and MC asked, "Isn't it pointless to hold out any longer? Let him raise the white flag. In any case, he wasn't going to lose to him." He released even more power, and Yeren covered her head, thinking that the intensity of the aura he was emitting was completely different from before. At this rate, not to mention the students, even she was barely holding on. If someone didn't take action quickly, it would be dangerous. Suddenly, the aura subsided, and all the examinees froze and began whispering. Yeren didn't understand why everyone was acting like this and thought, what went wrong? She didn't notice Wolfgang appearing next to her. He touched her shoulder and said that they were leaving because this had lost its meaning. Confused, she asked where he was going so suddenly. What about the qualification exam? What did he mean by this had lost its meaning? He ignored the questions and headed for the exit. Meanwhile, one of the examiners approached the wall, and his colleague asked where he was going instead of helping the guy up. The man stared in shock at the spear. The sacred relic of Leonidas had shattered into pieces. He turned to his colleague, confused, asking what they should do now, and at that moment, the wall collapsed with a roar. News of this immediately spread across all channels. Right now, Wolfgang and Yeren were sitting in the hall, waiting for their turn. He drank a soda and noted that the constellation held up well, but he was no match for her. Finally, their turn came, and Yeren asked him to stop eating and follow her. They approached the consultation window, where Yeren was currently resolving all the problems that arose because of Wolfgang. The consultant said that to obtain a hunter's license, he needed to settle the issue with the damaged sacred relic. He simply needed to pay compensation of 100 million won. If Wolfgang had trouble paying, his guarantor could do it for him. Hearing this, Yaren was shocked, and the consultant told them to consider themselves lucky. The 100 million compensation was for the trial wall. Since there was no possibility of damaging the sacred relic in the first place, there were no compensation rules for it, so they couldn't even apply them. In the end, he was given an F-rank hunter's license. They left the association and Yaren gave Wolfgang his hunter's card, along with the overdraft account, and he asked, "What the hell is that?" She told him that after deducting the 10 million won subsidy, it's a 90 million won account, a debt he has to pay off. He asked, "Is 100 million a lot of money?" She sat down next to him and tiredly told him that it was a lot. What should she do? She won't have to pay off all that debt alone, right? MC asked, "Don't hunters make a lot of money?" She told him that they do make a lot, but they are only regular hunters, and high-ranking ones at that. Archaeologist hunters like her don't hunt, so they have to live off sponsorship money. Besides, if an F-rank hunter tried to hunt to save up 100 million, it would be hard for them. He asked if F-rank hunters are supposed to hunt weak creatures that don't pay well, right? That's fine. He can take out hundreds of those creatures with one blow. Where are the dungeons? Let her take him there right now. They took the subway, and once they got back to the city, she told him he needed an agency to work properly as a hunter. He asked if it was like the guilds from his era. She told him they were similar organizations. They collected the loot for him, and also handled dungeon entry permits on his behalf. He asked if they just took their cut as intermediaries, right? She told him they took a commission of 20 to 30%. But they were efficient in resolving all sorts of disputes, so it wasn't that bad. The first agency rejected them because they didn't accept foreigners, the second rejected them because Wolfgang hadn't graduated from the academy, and the third looked at his credit rating, which he didn't have. Leaving another agency, the MC noted that people of this era talk too much, and Yaren said with a tired sigh that this is a group that risks their lives fighting demons. They want to take reliable people, even if they wanted to trust him. It looks difficult. She looked at him decisively. He asked why she was looking at him like that, and she said that since they were in South Korea, he looked like a foreigner. Maybe if he shaved his beard, he would look a little neater. Even though he walks around with an animal skin, shaving will not change anything. He told her that a beard is a barbarian's pride. He will never shave it. And this is not an ordinary skin. It belongs to the Fenrir clan. She exclaimed in response, "What use are Fenrir or pride now? They can't do anything about his credit history. So shouldn't he at least change his appearance? Isn't he going to work as a hunter?" A man approached them and called out to them, and they angrily asked him what he wanted. He smiled nervously and asked if they were both looking for a hunting agency. His name was Kim Junwon, and he was the assistant manager. He led them into the office and said, "As Hunter Kang Yaren probably already knows, their agency, MUA, is a well-known and large one. As the name suggests, they're the best agency working to create a utopia." Yaren thought they might actually be famous, but only for scamming hunters. The man said he'd been watching the two of them, and it seemed they'd been rejected by almost every agency. Luckily, they were currently running a promotion where they temporarily significantly lowered the contract requirements. Yaren closed her eyes, thinking they were acting like bandits, so none of the hunters wanted to join them. The man continued, "Since he lacks some qualities, the profit-sharing ratio will be 6 to 4. The contract period is exclusive for 3 years, with the condition of entering the dungeons at least twice a week. In exchange, they'll set a signing bonus of 20 million won. Yaren objected. It was practically a slave contract. Wolfgang should never sign that. He declared that he'd sign the contract for 100 million. And Yaren jumped up, exclaiming that he couldn't do that. He asked, "They need 100 million, right?" She told him that was something else entirely, while the man smirked and said that they could give a 100 million signing bonus. However, what about a 10-year contract with a 5-to-5 ratio? When the meeting ended, they went out to the bus stop, and Yaren asked with displeasure, how could he just go and sign a contract like that? Anyone could see that it was full of toxic conditions. Doesn't he know the importance of a contract? Were there really no contracts in his era? He asked in return. Why wouldn't he know the importance of a contract? There were countless cases where people suffered terribly because of a failed divine contract. She tiredly touched her head, asking how he could sign that back then, and he told her that he does everything for those who help him. That's how he lived his life. The demon who slaughtered his family and his tribe, Devil House, should she just find him. For revenge, he made a contract with the Archangel Seraphim and took part in a holy war against demons. If he kills Devil House, he can bring everyone back to life. Then he can see his parents, his family, and his fallen comrades again. That's all he needs. Yaren apologized to him. She had only guessed, but never realized that he had such a deep, tragic history. But he must understand why she is so worried. He is the first person from the past she has ever met, and he may even become her very first achievement. Just as adventures and battles are the barbarian's destiny, doing everything possible to help him adapt to this world is her business. Junwon approached them and apologized to her for interrupting them, but the accommodation issue they requested had already been resolved. If they don't mind, it would be better if he came there right now. That's how they parted. After returning home, Yaren began corresponding with her colleagues. They posted news about the destruction of the sacred relic in the general chat. She didn't even know it was in the news. On the other hand, the sacred relic was turned to dust, so it would be strange if they just kept quiet about it. Choi Jongyan asked if the person who broke it appeared on the screen for a second. Was it that guy by any chance? Yeren confirmed it. It was the stone statue from the dungeon she'd shown them earlier. They asked in surprise, has he woke up yet? Does that mean the curse was broken? This is an achievement that will go down in history for archaeologist hunters. Yeren exclaimed irritably that it really is an achievement that will go down in history, except for the fact that it almost turned her into a loan defaulter. She wrote in the chat that it was certainly an achievement, but she was already dying here. He's human, but they can't even have a normal conversation. Her colleague asked her to pass it on to her if it was too difficult for her. She also wanted to try to achieve the historic feat. Yeren asked if she would pass it on if she were in her place. She remembered Wolfgang leaving and nodding at her, and she became worried. Would he be okay there alone? She needed to buy him at least a few cans of soda. Some time ago, the man led MC to his room. He immediately asked when he could start entering the dungeons, and he told him that he could go out all 5 days a week, excluding weekends, 2 of which were mandatory. Squeezing through a narrow, low passage, he asked if it mattered if he went out all 5 times. Junwan told him that it didn't. They would notify him of the time to go into the dungeon via the provided mobile phone. He should just check his messages and go out to the vacant lot in front of the building on time. After that, he wished him a good rest and left, and he entered this small room and noted that it was about the size of the White Stag Inn in the Dwarf Caves. Sitting down on the bed, he felt the springiness of the mattress and noted that it was a little better than that tavern. In any case, he needed to find a restroom, but first, a torch. Our Barbarian does not yet know that the hardest of modern trials awaits him. He remembered that he had spoken about something called a mobile phone, and he saw a box on the windowsill with a rectangular thing emitting light on top. He thought that this card was a mobile phone and took it, wondering how to use it. It looked smaller than the thing Yeren used. This era was full of things he didn't understand. Sitting down on this small bed, he realized that trying to adapt to the present time would not be easy for him. A new day had dawned. It was time to go to the dungeon. Wolfgang walked out into the vacant lot in front of the building, and the foreman who was greeting the hunters asked who that ridiculously dressed guy was. Was he a newbie? MC confirmed it, and he asked, "He's not gonna go there like that, is he?" Wolfgang asked with displeasure how he dared stare at him so brazenly, but then he remembered Yeren's words. He had to promise her that he would never attack another person. He asked why he shouldn't, and she explained that things were different here than in the era he lived in. The main reason humanity managed to withstand the demons was the strength of the hunters, but there was something else equally important. Information networks, more advanced than ever before in history. Besides, people in their time have an extremely strong aversion to humans attacking others. He did say that there was a demon he absolutely had to find, so if he attacked people and made enemies everywhere, it would probably become even more difficult to find. The foreman said that they were going into a dungeon, not filming a movie. He was heading into a dungeon with slimes, so he should go and change into a protective suit. He touched his sword and asked, "What kind of metal plate is that?" He told him that it was his weapon, and he told him to leave it here. He wouldn't need it. Since he was going to change anyway, he should take a bath at the same time. MC obeyed him. He pulled down his pants in front of everyone, and the foreman immediately covered his eyes and exclaimed, "What is he even doing? What's wrong with him?" Wolfgang proudly showed everyone his dignity and asked, "Didn't he himself tell him to wash and change? Let him just show him where the stream is, he'll be back quickly." The foreman called him an idiot and asked why he needed a stream. Finally, they hit the road, MC riding in the back of the truck, and his partner and the foreman in the cabin. The hunter put his hands behind his head and sighed heavily, asking why this dungeon was so far away. The man asked, what was he complaining about? It was a B-rank dungeon after all. He should be grateful they even let low-ranking hunters like him in there. The guy noted that everyone called it a B-rank dungeon, but in reality it was essentially an F-rank. All they do there is collect dead slimes. He needs money. He needs to save up for the exam to promote his hunter rank. The foreman asked, did he even have enough skills to pass the exam? Besides, where else could he make money so easily? All he has to do is collect dead monsters. It's not even dangerous. The guy asked discontentedly, so what? The pay is getting worse. Does he know how much they were paid last time? After paying the daily fee, he has so little left. The foreman got tired of listening to him and told him to quit if he didn't like something, and they finally arrived at the dungeon. There, they were met by the assistant manager, Kim Junwon. He greeted the foreman, noting that they had come a long way, and he asked what he was doing there. Is it because of the newbie? He replied that this was the new hunter's first assignment. What did he think of him? The foreman replied that he would say so when they sent him to work. More importantly, there was one urgent matter. Wolfgang climbed out of the back of the truck and greeted the agent, and he, greatly surprised by his appearance, asked why he was dressed like that. He replied that he was forced to take off his clothes and put on this strange outfit. It may look unusual, but it does not restrict his movements. Junwon exclaimed that it wasn't just his movements. He should have worn a hazmat suit like his partner. This was a slime dungeon, after all. He turned to the foreman, confused as to how he'd let this happen, and the foreman asked what he could have done. He was so huge that nothing fit. Everything would be fine. At least he could wear a gas mask. They just needed to make sure he didn't touch the slimes. Junwon was still unsure but didn't object, and while the MC was figuring out the gas mask, the foreman took the assistant manager aside and said he'd give him a briefing, and while they were clearing the first floor, he should hurry up and find him a suit. He asked if this was the urgent matter he'd mentioned earlier. He confirmed it, and then the man turned to manager Kang Junmo and asked if he thought one gas mask was enough for the first floor. He smiled crookedly and told him that the first floor should be safe, since it mostly contained only bodies, but starting from the second floor, there were still living ones and slimes. Junwon asked them to start from the first floor, and he would hurry back with the suit. He called out to Wolfgang and asked him not to go to the second floor without a suit under any circumstances. After that, the two were armed with peculiar slime vacuums, and the manager led them inside, along the way, explaining the job to the newbie. They need to collect slime bodies inside the dungeon. The first floor was mostly dead, so they only need to be careful of the toxic gas. The second hunter told him to stop. It wasn't his first time here. And then MC asked, "Are there a lot of dead slimes inside? And how many of these containers for carrying slimes are there?" They entered the first floor. The guy asked the barbarian if he would be okay. These things are made of special glass, so they are quite heavy. The container alone weighs almost 10 kilograms. But when filled with slime bodies, each one weighs at least 30. He told him that it wouldn't be a problem. The only thing he regretted was that they were too bulky to carry. The guy asked if he had ever dealt with slimes before, and Wolfgang replied that he knew such monsters existed. They were such insignificant creatures that he had never had a reason to fight them. The guy remarked, "Then this would be a good chance to learn. F-rank hunters like them encounter them every other day. And yet for some reason, there were few dead slimes today." He noticed one, immediately ran to it to collect it, and told Wolfgang to come over and look at it. "That's what a slime is. They're usually soft, but when they die they harden and become quite durable. Even dead slimes are poisonous, so you can't touch them with your bare hands." But MC didn't listen to him and picked up the slime, noting that the poison seemed pretty strong. His partner immediately ran up to him excitedly and exclaimed, "Are you crazy? Why is he touching that with his bare hands?" He took his palm to inspect it for damage and said, "Special protective gloves are one thing, but that's definitely a dead slime. If you touch it with bare skin, the flesh will melt. Or at least it should." Wolfgang's palm was intact, which surprised him greatly, and asked why he was completely fine. He decided to get back to work and warned him that touching them with bare hands was dangerous anyway, so he should be more careful. MC didn't listen to him again. He poked his finger at the dead slime, and the guy, noticing this, exclaimed, "But he just told him that his fingers would melt like that." Wolfgang showed him his finger and said that his hands wouldn't melt from something like that, then took off his gas mask, since it was nothing but an inconvenience. His partner asked in surprise, could he really breathe without it? He answered that he had no problem with that at all. Didn't he say that he needed to earn money? He should hurry then. He had talked about money on the way here. The guy was surprised that he heard it from so far away and wondered how good his hearing was. MC told him to stop chatting and get to work, and some time passed. They were already deep in the first floor of the slime dungeon. The guy laid out half-empty containers on the floor and noted that they had come so far, but still hadn't filled a single container completely. Why were there so few slimes here? Wolfgang asked. Is that so unusual? The guy confirmed it. By now, they should have already filled 2 containers. At this rate, they might even end up in the red today. MC offered him to go down one more floor, but he immediately refused, since it was too dangerous for 2 F-rank hunters to go down there. Wolfgang put the container holder on his back and said that they would go there. He would fill each of these containers for him. But the guy didn't want to risk it, and said that they would just write down today as a loss. He was serious. It really was dangerous. At least he had a protective suit, and he had nothing at all. He told him that it didn't matter at all, and the guy asked if he was really sure about that. MC headed for the stairs and confirmed it. Besides, something was bothering him. There was a sound coming from below. He felt the presence of a demon there. Meanwhile, Yeren kept trying to call him, but he didn't answer. She thought it was strange. Didn't they say that they gave him a working phone and sent her his number? This is bad. The doctor is waiting for him. She headed for the exit and passed the agent who was talking to the manager right now. He said that even the Hunters Association didn't have a protective suit in his size, and if they needed one, it would take at least a week. He was sorry, but they would have to stop today after clearing the first floor. Yeren recognized him and stopped, and by that point, he had already ended the call and said that he would have to go back to the dungeon with the slimes. He really should buy his own car. Yeren immediately appeared behind him and asked if Wolfgang was in that dungeon now. He practically screamed in fear, and she asked angrily, didn't he tell her yesterday that he had given him a phone and a corporate debit card? He told her that they definitely gave him both, and she asked, then why couldn't she get through to him? He told her that it was a mystery to him too, and she ordered him to take her there right away. He was confused and asked where exactly to take her, which angered her even more, and she exclaimed, where else should she go? Of course, she needed to go to the dungeon where Wolfgang was now. The two were already on the second floor and hunting slimes, or rather, MC was hunting, and his partner was just watching. He reached out a finger to a slime slowly sliding down the wall, and the guy worriedly asked him to be careful. The living ones are even more poisonous. He grabbed the slime with his bare hand, threw it into a container, and noted that they accumulated much faster on the second floor. His partner filled his container and said that it should be enough to pay for the rank advancement exam. He turned to Wolfgang with a smile and suggested that he go back and pick up today's payment. They filled all the containers they brought, but he was nowhere to be found, only the beckoning descent to the third floor. He glanced down and wondered if he had really gone down there. There was a warning sign in front of the entrance. No one should enter the third floor. It's a restricted area controlled by the Holy Star Guild. If you ignore the guild's restrictions, consider yourself already dead. Worried about his partner, he went down to the third floor and called out loudly, telling him he wasn't allowed in. He ran out into the hall with a huge container and a slime inside, where he found Wolfgang. He was surprised to see the Slime King sitting inside the barrier. So, all the slimes on the first and second floors were created here? He pointed to a device in front of the barrier and explained to Wolfgang that it was a mana injector. It kept the barrier active by supplying it with energy. He examined the device carefully and noted that slimes continued to emerge through those small pipes, and then they rose to the upper floors where there was light. These were the slimes they were collecting, and the Holy Star Guild made money off of them. The MC immediately noticed the airflow change. Then the entire dungeon trembled, and he pointed to a pipe in the barrier and said it was coming from above. A pile of trash fell from the pipe directly onto a slime, and he asked, "Is that how they feed them?" The fallen trash was immediately absorbed by the slime, and the guy remarked, "They eat the trash scattered from the surface. Did they really make money by feeding them?" The system informed Wolfgang about the detection of a new language. The ability to understand languages, granted to the contractor by the Archangel Seraphim, was activated. He froze, and the guy asked what was going on. Is he hearing something again? He told him that it wasn't so. And while he was dealing with that, the guy noticed slimes gathering near the barrier and warned Wolfgang about it. As soon as he turned to face them, a slime flew into his face, and then another, and a whole bunch more, until they completely covered his body. His partner was very scared by this sight. At that moment he closed his eyes and heard a quiet voice whispering, "Kill." He looked up a slime in the barrier and asked, "So it can talk?" The slime asked him to kill it, and it said that it will fulfill his wish if he answers its question. Does he know where Devil House is? He answered him that he doesn't know anything. MC didn't interrogate him, and when the slimes finally got off him, his partner excitedly ran around him from all sides and asked, "Is he okay?" His clothes were almost completely melted. "It doesn't hurt him, right?" He told him to stop. "This creature is asking him to kill it." The guy asked again in surprise, "Does the Slime King really want to die?" He confirmed it, and the guy warned him that this is a B-rank dungeon, and they are only F-rank hunters. They can't just go and kill him because they feel like it. Wolfgang pointed to the mana injector and asked if he would die if he destroyed it. He hesitantly confirmed this, but he couldn't just smash the injector just because he wanted to. MC examined the device and noted that it would break with one light blow, and his partner said that he couldn't break it, and even if he could, he couldn't. The injector was controlled by the Holy Star Guild. He suggested that they just go back upstairs before they did anything bad, but Wolfgang ignored him and lightly tapped the injector, causing a crack to appear in the glass, and the guy stared at it in shock. He immediately stood in front of him and spread his arms, covering the injector, and worriedly asked Wolfgang to stop. He said this was a guild-restricted area. How was he going to deal with the consequences? MC ordered him to leave. He had to keep his promise, and the guy nervously said that they could worry about it later. Right now, it was a different matter. But it was too late. The crack quickly spread across the glass, and with it the Slime King's barrier began to crumble. The slimes ran to their king. MC ordered the guy to go, and he would deal with this here, and he exclaimed, "How can he leave him alone and go?" He pushed him in the back and told him to run faster. Soon everything here will explode. The guy was in no hurry to leave and asked, "What is he trying to do?" "Let him follow him out. He has to get out of here alive." Wolfgang called his words useless, worrying. After which the guy ran to the exit and exclaimed that he has to get out alive, no matter what. When he finally left, it was the Slime King's turn. The injector completely broke, the barrier cracked, and Junwan and Yeren arrived at the dungeon. Junwan immediately asked the manager about the hunters, and he replied that they should have left long ago, but they were still missing. The man looked worriedly at the entrance, after which there was a rumble and the ground began to shake. Yeren became worried, not understanding what was happening, and Junwan told her it sounded like an earthquake. She exclaimed in surprise, "A sudden earthquake? Are you sure this isn't another problem?" The rumble and shaking died down. They calmed down a bit, and Junwan, dusting his clothes, said he should report this to his superiors and head to the dungeon first. He was also worried about the hunters. Junwan turned to Yeren, asking what she would do, to which she replied that she would like to go with them if they had spare gas masks. Meanwhile, the Slime King had freed himself from his cage and was spreading throughout the cave. He turned to Wolfgang and asked if he hadn't said he would kill him. He replied that he should at least see the outside world before he died. Wouldn't it be unfair to die while being suppressed by others? The Slime King agreed with him. This place would soon collapse. Let him carry it outside. It would attach itself to his body and follow him. The Slime King clung to Wolfgang, immediately noticing the strange sensation, and then ran toward the exit, dragging him along. A huge mass of slimes collided with the walls of the cave, trying to squeeze through the passage, causing another rumble. The guy, who was now only halfway to the exit, felt the vibration and rushed towards the exit, abandoning all the containers with slimes. The sound grew louder. He realized that the monster was following right behind him. He turned the corner, slimes entered the corridor, and Wolfgang followed them. He ran after the guy, and at that very moment he saw the exit and smiled, glad that he survived. And then the barbarian's face appeared next to him. He was very surprised, and when he grabbed him by the clothes, he thought, did he really use him as bait? The gas mask flew off his head. MC grabbed him tighter by the clothes, and then threw him with all his strength straight towards the exit. When they both found themselves outside the dungeon, he abruptly stopped and turned to the king of slimes, grabbed him tighter, and began to spin him, preparing to throw. Seeing the slime circling in the sky, all the hunters present were speechless, and then Wolfgang threw the monster onto a nearby cliff so that it could enjoy its last moments. The guy nervously called out to him and asked, didn't he say he was going to kill the Slime King? Why did he drag him outside? He told him that he made a deal with him. But before killing him, shouldn't the one who was locked up see the sunlight at least once? The hunter admired him, and then he handed him a piece of slime with a glowing thing inside and told him to take it. It was the Slime King's core. The Slime King said that he would die if it detonated. He also mentioned that part of his power would transfer to whoever detonated it. The guy took it and, surprised, asked why he was giving it to him, to which he replied, it's power he doesn't need. If it bothers him, then he should just consider it an expression of his gratitude, because a barbarian repays those who help him. He stared at him in surprise and thanked him for it, while the Slime King said that it was so nice in the outside world and in the sun. MC noticed Yeren below. He called out to her loudly and asked if she had come to meet him. He jumped down to her, while the manager contacted the management and asked them to send transport trucks, and as many as possible. The quantity was huge. They would need at least 50 of them. Yeren approached them, asking if she could take Wolfgang, and Junwan did not object. In any case, it would take several hours to sort things out. Yeren got into the car and told Wolfgang to get in quickly. He asked what the rush was, and she asked if he was the one who made the mess here. Wasn't he? He told her that it wasn't so, and she asked him not to lie to her. Anyone would understand that he was the culprit. She asked the driver to go faster, and MC, in his defense, told her that he was simply keeping his promise. She didn't ask him about it and said that they needed to hurry. There was someone who had been waiting for him impatiently all day. Wolfgang's face immediately lit up with rage, and he asked, did she really find him? Devil House? When night fell, the foreman asked, aren't you going home, Deputy Junwan? He didn't have a car yet, right? Junwan replied that the count was delayed and that he should wait and make sure it was done before he could leave. The foreman replied that it was true. They said they had dozens of trucks pinned down, so there was no way the count could be done on time. It couldn't be helped. He'd go first. At that moment, Junwan said on the phone, no, not 150 kilograms, but 150 tons. Yes, that's right, 150 tons. The girl on the phone, a team leader named Miyun, replied, is it really possible to kill 150 tons of slime, you idiot? She called Junwan again and said that if he were in her place, he'd readily send 1,004,000,000 won upon hearing that, especially for a day's pay for the services of some F-rank hunter. If something so irrational happened, couldn't he at least consider that something serious could have happened in the dungeon? Please, she suggests he try using his brain, Jinmo. Don't let him just think about living a carefree life, relying on his sister for support. He should go down to the dungeon right now and check if there are any problems. Junmo answered yes and hung up. He asked, is this just because she's the team leader? If she weren't his sister, he wouldn't be acting like this. Junwan asked again, what happened? Are they saying they won't pay the severance pay? Junmo replied that he was told to go down to the dungeon and check if everything is okay before contacting them again, and he's so sick of working overtime and having to do what he's told. What can a simple employee do? It seems he has no choice but to go down. He apologizes, but he'll have to wait a little longer. Sometime later, Wolfgang was in the shower and noticed water pouring right inside the house. The more he looked at it, the more astonishing it seemed to him. How did the water flow? He asked Yeren if she knew how it worked. Did they collect rainwater on the roof? Yeren asked him to stop asking questions and wash up quickly. She said there was someone who had been waiting all day to see him. It wasn't like she had found Devil House right away, but they needed this person. And since she had pulled out the biggest clothes she could find right now, let him try this on. Wolfgang replied, okay, he'll do that. A battle-hardened warrior won't even complain about the trendy tank top she's prepared for him. When he changed, he said, by the way, is the person waiting for him important to Yeren? She replied that he was an important person of the leader of the archaeologist hunters. He was surprised, and she said it was too late today, so she suggested buying normal clothes tomorrow, and shoes too. He agreed and asked again, is there anything to eat? He'd been starving all day. She replied, oh my god, really? First, let him say hello, and she'll go buy something. She entered the room and asked, doctor, he's been waiting for this for a long time, hasn't he? She brought Wolfgang to them. Please let him say hello. This is Dr. Myeongyun. Yeren said that he's a hunter archaeologist and acts as a hunter brewer. He is also known as a leader in the excavation of ancient Korean relics. Myeongyun replied that it was nice to meet him and told him his name. Wolfgang also told him his name and said that he was from the Wolf tribe. He heard that he was the leader of archaeology or something like that. Where did the archaeology tribe take root? Yeren replied that it was not a tribe. It was a branch of science that studies the history of relics of the past, just like she does. He replied that everything was clear and said that they had greeted each other, so now they needed to eat something. After some time, they ordered food delivery and dined together at the table. Myungjin asked him to eat slowly. If this was not enough, he would order him more. Yerin also offered him a soda while he ate. Wolfgang replied, "Doctor, he heard that he wanted to meet with him. Something wrong?" He replied that he asked for a meeting because he had a few questions. "Isn't he being annoying?" Wolfgang said to ask, because he would answer within the limits of his knowledge. Myungjin said that if Wolfgang woke up from the past, his language should be different from theirs. So how did he speak Korean so well? Languages have peculiarities depending on the era, but Wolfgang's language doesn't feel or match as if he were a native speaker. He replied that he received the protection of angels and was given various abilities, the ability to understand and speak any language being one of these abilities. Myungjin asked again, "Angel, what is this? Is this the name of a constellation?" He asked Yerin again, "What are constellations?" She replied that he saw this during the hunter exam last time. A creature like Leonidas or those who call themselves the descendants of barbarians. Wolfgang asked again, "Do they call those weaklings constellations?" Angels are creatures of a new order for the constellations they speak of. Unlike the major constellations, angels at least have the power to deal with demons. One day, they came to the barbarian tribe he belonged to and made a request. Myungjin asked again, "Can I learn more?" After a moment, Myungjin asked permission to systematize this information. In Wolfgang's era, angels and demons fought. At the angels' request, barbarian tribes came and took part in the war, but unfortunately all the barbarians were demons. Wolfgang, the only survivor, was out for revenge and attacked the demons alone. Myungjin said that he was upset with all the demons and met an enemy named Devil House, but fell under a spell and turned to stone. Wolfgang was upset and Yerin took his shaking broad hand and said that everything was fine, they would be able to find him. He closed his eyes, trying to calm himself, and Myungjin bowed and apologized. "It must be a painful memory." Wolfgang replied, "No, it was a memory he had to constantly repeat in his head." Myungjin apologized again and asked if he could try asking him for one more favor. Wolfgang told him to speak, and he replied that he didn't know how it would sound when he was standing before them alive, but since he was originally discovered as a relic, they needed to confirm its authenticity. Wolfgang asked again, "Is it a relic?" Myungjin lowered his gaze and pulled out a statue from his pocket, created by the constellation he had contracted with as a martial artist, the Rough Buddha. It was one of the key figures who led the dynasty's monks to victory during the Mongol invasions. They simply needed to invite the constellation for a short visit for verification. He knew he was uncomfortable confronting the constellation's incarnation, but was it possible? Wolfgang considered this, and Yerin asked him for a favor with a smile. Her research achievement in finding Sir Wolfgang depended on being recognized. He called her by name, and she asked, "Please," as the doctor would also be assisting him in his search for Devil House. Myungjin confirmed he would actively assist him, and Wolfgang replied that he hadn't said he wouldn't. Yerin asked again, "Then does he give his permission?" She shouted at the doctor to hurry, and he replied that it was an honor. The system reported that the constellation martial artist, the Rough Buddha, acknowledges the barbarian hero and expresses interest. The constellation martial artist rudely states that he has put an end to the chaotic era. Myungjin was surprised. The end of the chaotic era? The constellation martial artist, the Rough Buddha, expresses his respect for the barbarian hero who put an end to the constellation war. Wolfgang said there was no need for such formalities. For him, this was only half the victory. He was surprised and apologized again, saying he had run out of mana. In any case, Wolfgang is the real deal. Thank him for his time. After some time inside the dungeon, Junmo, in a special form, asked what was going on. He didn't understand why everything had become like this. Myun asked loudly, "What? Why did the Slime King disappear?" He replied that the containment unit had been completely destroyed, and that the inside was completely empty. He hadn't seen a single slime while descending to the 3rd floor. She started screaming, "Is the containment unit broken too?" She would kill Junmo if he continued joking. Who on earth could break a containment unit that even she, an A-rank hunter, couldn't? That is impossible, unless an S-rank hunter was secretly deployed. He replied, "Sister, who does she think he is?" He confirmed that those who had entered this morning were F-rank hunters. One of them was a complete rookie among rookies. She asked again, "What?" Junmo confirmed, yes, he had received his hunter license just a day ago. Mion wondered, is he absolutely certain of this? Perhaps the problem lay with this person. Have him gather their personal information and send it to him. Junmo asked again, what was she going to do about it? Mion asked again, what did he think? She was going to file a lawsuit against the agency for damages and reveal the person's identity to secure evidence. Junmo asked again, when were they going to pay the 1.4 billion won? The company employee had been waiting there for several hours. Mion started yelling at them, telling them they didn't mind paying and for her to send them back, idiot. After a while, Wolfgang appeared in the store and turned to Yerin and said he had a question for her. She asked again, what is it? He showed her a plastic bank card and said, this thing, if you touch it, can't you contact someone far away? Why can't he do anything? Yerin replied, did he really think it was a phone? No wonder she couldn't get through to him. Did he get anything else besides that? Wolfgang replied that he did. There was one thing in there that looked like a bank card, but it was more like food, so he didn't take it. Yeren assumed he had confused the phone and the bank card. Wolfgang asked again, really? How was he supposed to know if no one had explained anything to him? And why was she staring at him like that? Yeren smiled and replied, nothing. She'd explained everything in detail after they finished shopping. At that moment, a salesperson ran up to them and yelled an apology for keeping them waiting. That's the largest shoe size they have in the store, he said, trying to find it. Next to them, a guy was watching Wolfgang and looking at his photo. He exuded dark energy, and Yeren noticed it. Wolfgang replied that the shoes seemed to fit him, but he wasn't sure if he had them on correctly. When Wolfgang dressed in decent clothes, Yeren exclaimed that he looked great. Didn't he look too old? She tried to modernize him and accidentally unlocked the Peaky Blinders skin, worthy of praise. She was just glad they found clothes that fit him. Still, it would probably be better to relieve his headache. She thought he'd be much better off without it. Now he really does look like a man from this century, almost like a professional wrestler. He's comfortable, right? She wished he'd continue dressing so stylishly. He replied that if that's what she wanted, he'd try. Yeren said these weren't wishes. She was simply telling him that this was the custom in their time. He said that things had become temporarily complicated though. Yeren now asked if he should wait a second, since she needed to go to the restroom. The guy following Wolfgang said it would be better if they hit him first, and then they'd see, right? His partner responded, well, he'd distract him. At that moment, Wolfgang was confused. But why? Were there two different doors? At that moment, the system reported that the Black Bison Tamer constellation was activating the sprint skill through the contractor. The guy was thrown aside when Wolfgang threw him with a bag. At the same moment, the Brute Fist constellation activated the heavy strike skill from Chang Minjae's temporary contract. When Minjae lunged at Wolfgang with his fist, he simply tossed it aside, clutching his head and saying, so, those two who've been chasing him all day are the ones who sent them? Hoson asked again, Wolfgang? If so, then let him go with them if he didn't want any trouble. At that moment, Wolfgang hit Minjae on the head, shattering his glasses. Minjae screamed that this brat should be a rancor. Where did he get such strength? He screamed that Hoson was a freak. Was he seriously going to just stand there and watch this? Wolfgang said he was asking again, who sent them? Was it the Holy Star Guild? Yeren, meanwhile, was in the restroom, saying that Wolfgang was incredibly troublesome. She hoped he would get used to the modern world soon. He probably had no idea how to use a public restroom. That was too bad. She couldn't follow him. He told her to go back and tell his superior that if this happened again, their tribe would be wiped off the face of the earth. Hoshon grabbed Minjae to help him, and he exclaimed, damn. At that moment, Yeren entered the hallway and said they would eat first and then return. When they returned, she would teach him how to use a phone and a bank card. Wolfgang replied that everything would be as she wished and asked what they would eat this time. Yeren asked again, was there anything he would like to try? Just let him say that they were emptying Dr. Myung-yoon's bank card today anyway. This morning, the Holy Star Guild sued them for 6 billion won in damages. It was for breaching the slime dungeon barrier and destroying the Slime King. Yesterday, the administrator informed him that the Slime King barrier had been breached. There was no point in blaming them, right? Junwon had mentioned that the raid rank of that dungeon was B rank, and the hunters they sent were A rank. His interlocutor replied that the Holy Star swears that the slime corpse they found yesterday was the Slime King. So instead of paying them 1 billion won, they're demanding 6 billion in damages. Junwon was saying this was crazy, talking such nonsense. He turned to Junwon and said, let me ask him directly, is he 100% sure that the two who went down there yesterday are F-rank hunters? Junwon replied that he checked the licenses and it clearly stated F-rank. He's been in this business for a while and he used to be a hunter himself, so he knows how it all works. The guy offered to talk to him by looking at the recording, the video evidence provided by the Holy Star Guild to support their claims. He showed a video of Wolfgang easily fighting Minjae, and the guy asked, do you see that hunter in a hoodie lying face down? His name is Hoson, and he's an A-rank hunter, but his skills easily rival those of the D rank. And that hunter with his head pinned down over there is Minjae, who was recently promoted to D rank. Although these two caught him off guard, they were the ones who were completely routed. The guild is Star, and they demand to know who it is, the MUA agency, and they have filed a formal complaint about this whole mess. They demand to know who is behind them and ask why they hid their real ranks under the guise of F ranks to pull off such a trick. Junwon asked if he seriously doubted him now. They hadn't paid them a penny yet, and he would go there and tell them everything he thought. His colleague asked him to calm down, saying that the main thing was that his hands were clean. Since everything had gone wrong, it would be difficult for MUA and the Holy Star Guild to continue doing business anyway. They could file a counterclaim to get their 1.4 billion won back, and Junwon asked him to please make sure they squeeze it out of them. Okay, he had to go. He needed to meet the rookie hunter to sign the contract. He got into a taxi and asked the driver to take him to the right place. As he got in, he watched a video and muttered about how those damn jerks from the Color and Star Guild were resorting to all sorts of dirty tricks just to rip them off. If they kept scamming him like this, when would he ever save up for a car? Suddenly, he asked himself to stop and realized a D-rank hunter using the power of the constellation had grabbed his arm, but he hadn't even moved. Shouldn't Sir Wolfgang have been linked to the constellation yet? How was such a trick even possible? Maybe he needs to test him to see if he's the real deal or just small fry. A few days later, Wolfgang was crossing a crosswalk, holding a huge sword behind his back. He wondered if this meant he needed to stop and walk based on the color of the lights. Was the local king oppressing his people too much? He recalled the words of an acquaintance who had said that this thing called a traffic light meant he should go straight ahead and cross 5 crosswalks with these signals. Wolfgang realized he was seeing green, just as he'd said. At that moment, someone waved and shouted his name. He saw Yeren and approached her. She asked if he had trouble finding his way. He replied that the foreman had given him clear instructions. Yeren asked if he brought everything she asked for. Correct. Let him come in. Dr. Myungjun was waiting for him. When they entered the room, Myungjun was surprised they'd already arrived. He apologized for making them redo the route, knew it was troublesome, and suggested they go to the storage room first. He approached the sword and declared it incredible. Wolfgang asked why the man was acting like that. She replied that it was because he was an archaeologist, a 1,000-year-old relic, and the man who used it appeared. It would be strange if he weren't excited. Wolfgang replied that he believed so, and he also brought the clothes he was wearing. The wolf skin inside belongs to a Fenrir, and it's usually extremely valuable, so they should handle it with care. Myungjun asked again, he's talking about a Fenrir? There's a storage room here. Let the guys say hello to him. This is Mr. Wolfgang he told them about. The guys came closer and were surprised. So he's the same stone statue from that cave? He was huge, even as a statue, but even bigger in person. A living relic, it seems unreal. She's pleased to meet you. She's Jiho, an A-rank hunter and archaeologist. She offered him her hand, and Wolfgang shook it and told her his name. At that moment, Jiho turned his attention to his assistant and told him his name. He also replied that it was nice to meet you. His name was Jungyeon. Yeren peeked out from behind Wolfgang and said, Sister, she's here too. Jiho replied that they hadn't seen each other in a while, and Jungyeon exclaimed, what kind of sword is this? Did this sword also awaken with him? Wolfgang replied that this sword had been passed down through generations to the chieftain of the wolf tribe. Yeren clapped her hands and shouted, yes, they've arrived just in time. They just happen to have a relic of origin that's giving her a headache. Let them take a look at it. Wolfgang turned to Yeren and asked, are they always so fussy? Yeren replied that they were simply excited, so she asked for understanding. When they approached the stand, they were very surprised, and Jiho announced that it was a relic they found in the same cave where he had been found, in the form of a stone statue. Does he happen to know what it is? All the other relics in that cave were ordinary, so there were no problems. But this one defied all analysis. At the entrance to the village lived Jonas, Lewis's son. He was a brave man who fought alongside him in place of the wolf tribe's chieftain, and he was also his closest friend. After the holy war against the demons began, he fought them and died a glorious death. This weapon belonged to Jonas, and it was his weapon too. His hands trembled with the memory, and Wolfgang said he had carried this weapon across the battlefield, and with it had slain 1,000, even tens of thousands of demons. Yeren spoke, that's the story behind it. He must find the demon who killed Jonas. At that moment, Yeren grabbed his hand and told him not to try to do all this alone. He has comrades at his side now, Master Wolfgang. Let him allow them to help, and they will solve this together. She will also try to find out everything, so let him be strong, alright? Wolfgang smiled and answered, okay, and thanked Yeren. Jiho apologized and said she'd accidentally brought up painful memories, but Wolfgang said not to worry about it, since it was thanks to them that he found the Jonas weapon. More importantly, I wonder if this helped with the research they wanted to do? Jiho replied that it had helped immensely. Now that they'd confirmed that this item was related to him, it made things easier. At that moment, Wolfgang exclaimed, wait, that's it! He saw a special object in front of him and tried to grab it with his hand. But when he squeezed it, Jiho exclaimed, no, there's a barrier there, and it can't be taken outside. Why is he doing this so suddenly, Master Wolfgang? He asked again, why is this thing here? At that moment, he was thrown aside by the system and stopped abruptly, suddenly remembering what had happened to him some time ago, when he was opposite the wolf and that very demon. That weapon had hit him in the back at that moment, and he remembered Devil House. The stain on that weapon was familiar to him. Yeren asked again, is this Master Wolfgang's blood? He replied, yes, he feels the sacred power of the angel with whom he had made a contract, and the weak magic remaining on that arrowhead undoubtedly belonged to Devil House. Jiho guessed that meant it was imbued with magic, making it impossible to study. Yeren spoke up, but it was still too reckless. They could all be in danger, and if the barrier stone exploded, everything would be bad. Wolfgang apologized for that, as he had momentarily lost control of his emotions. Jiho replied that it was okay. Thanks to this, they had obtained valuable results. She assumed that large blunt weapons couldn't be analyzed because they were sacred relics, but she never expected this from the arrowhead. They didn't realize it couldn't be studied because it was imbued with magic. If they had taken at least one devil hunter, it wouldn't have been so difficult. But how could one distinguish magic from sacred power? They both use mana, so if he wasn't a devil hunter, it wouldn't be easy to tell. Even she, an A-rank hunter, never thought it was because of magic. Wolfgang replied that it wasn't that he knew a method to distinguish them. Demons' auras simply felt different. He'd learned to recognize this naturally after encountering countless demons. He exclaimed that this was precisely why they needed a devil hunter. The Devil Association had led them to do this several times. Isn't she right, doctor? At that moment she asked fearfully. A devil hunter? Yeren asked. What happened? Jiho jumped up and said, Mr. Wolfgang, how about becoming a devil hunter? Yeren asked. Why a devil hunter? Jiho replied that a few days ago, the doctor had asked her to inquire about the devil house, and in response, Mr. Wolfgang had agreed to visit the lab. It was true that as a devil hunter, she had access to a much more extensive database than the doctor. But as they knew, archaeologists could only access data on what had already been discovered. Yeren confirmed that this was true, but when it came to information about demons, a devil hunter was given access to almost the entire system. Devil hunters were one of the greatest classes of hunters, but for someone like him, Lord Wolfgang wouldn't have a hard time qualifying. He could distinguish demons and was also strong. Wolfgang replied, how does one become a devil hunter? Jiho replied that it was simple. He just needed to pass the hunter rank promotion exam. Yeren was dumbfounded, and Jiho asked, what's with that? He replied that it was because of the rank promotion exam. She asked, why? Yeren said they wouldn't be holding it for a while. Jiho didn't understand, but why not? Myunghyun said he'd only heard fragments himself. Apparently, Lord Leonidas's spear, which was used in the rank promotion exam, had been damaged a few days ago, and he doubted they'd resume it until they found another suitable sacred relic for the exam. They wondered what had happened. Jiho was also upset and said that if there was no promotion exam, then becoming a devil hunter was out of the question. She was sorry, Mr. Wolfgang, but suddenly Jonghyun announced another way, and everyone turned to look at him in surprise. Jonghyun said that if their goal was simply to obtain a devil hunter license, then there was another way besides the promotion exam. Myunghyun asked in surprise, what is that? Jonghyun replied that they could enroll in the academy. Jonghyun explained that this was rare, but for rare professions like devil hunters, if the conditions were met, he could only obtain a license based on certification from a trusted institution. Myunghyun replied that he had seen a similar case before, and Jiho asked again, really? Yeren also asked, is that serious? But aren't there only teenagers there? Jiho replied that there were people in their 20s there too. She asks Wolfgang, just out of curiosity, how old he was before he froze. He replied that since his birth the 4 seasons have changed 33 times. The guys asked in surprise, 33? Jiho was surprised. Does that mean she's his Nuna? He asked again, Nuna? Yeren replied that men address older women in precisely that way. It's hard to believe, but since she's 3 years older than him, calling her Nuna is indeed correct. Wolfgang replied that if these are the rules of address here, he understands and will call her that from now on. At that moment she got angry, and Wolfgang asked again, what's wrong? Jiho shouted at him not to call her that with such a face. After some time, Junwan informed his colleague that the dungeon schedule would be sent to him via text message, and that he should please check his messages on time and go to the vacant lot in front of the building. He replied that he understood everything, and Junwan went outside, saying that one more thing had been completed today. The work had finished a little early. What should he do? The foreman said he'd pick up the new hunter who'd arrived yesterday. At that moment, Junwan noticed the door to room 305, where Wolfgang's name was written. Terrible memories came back to him, and he realized that one glance would tell him he wasn't just a simple hunter. He needed to assess his condition to decide whether to keep him or get rid of him. He also needed to check for any disqualifying flaws. He'd know for sure if they'd simply exchanged a single blow, and was there a good reason to start a fight? Meanwhile, Yeren was mentioning that recommendations can be written by hunters of rank and above, so she could do that. The MUA agency and the academy had a partnership, so it should be possible to suspend his hunter status. If he didn't want his contract extended due to the suspension, he could simply transfer to the guild after graduation. She said she'd cover the penalty for terminating his contract with the MUA agency. Wolfgang replied that he understood nothing about it, so he was leaving it in her hands. Yeren, she thought it would be better to transfer to the Jiho Guild. A guild that followed the dungeon had a better chance of finding Devil House than an agency that simply fulfilled orders. Wolfgang answered well. He understood everything. Junwan watched them from the side, and Yeren explained that the only remaining problem was the entrance fee. Honestly, that was the biggest problem. He asked again, was it money again? The era he lived in wasn't entirely different. But this era, Yeren, seemed to be a society where nothing could truly be accomplished without money. Yeren replied that nothing could be done about it. That's just the way humanity has become. Junwan came closer and said that if it was only the entrance fee to the academy, he could pay for it. Yeren was surprised. Junwan's deputy? He replied that he could do so only if Wolfgang did him one favor in return. Wolfgang asked again, did he want him to hit him once with all his might? Yeren begged him to reconsider. There was no need to incur danger, just out of right. He really needed the money to pay for the academy. He didn't need to kill him to get it. Junwan replied that it would be a mistake to underestimate him, just because he did administrative work, Even if he looked like that, he was a C-rank fighting-type hunter. He wasn't at the level to fall from a single blow from a mere F-rank hunter. Yaren was surprised. A C-rank and fighting-type hunter? And someone who looked so weak? He looked like he'd lose, even if he fought her. Junwan chuckled and replied that they didn't believe him. But wasn't it too much to judge someone solely by their appearance? He just told him he was a C-rank, but if he used the special properties of his constellation, even his rank wouldn't be a problem. Yaren thought that couldn't be true. He must be bluffing. If he was rank equivalent, then calling him a renowned hunter wouldn't be an exaggeration, and that couldn't be true. Or could it? Was there a reason he was truly so secretive, despite his outstanding abilities? That thing in his hand must be the sacred relic, the constellation he'd contracted with. She needed to know what it was to judge whether he was bluffing. Yaren asked Wolfgang to be careful. What the deputy was holding was a sacred relic. Wolfgang replied, "I see," but the barbarian wouldn't refuse the man's request. If he had a sacred relic, he should be able to withstand at least one blow. She asked again. His interpretation was a bit odd. He was curious to see how much power he could draw from the sacred relic. He asked Yaren to step back a little, lest the wind blow her. Yaren asked again, "Is he really going to do that?" Wolfgang frowned and said to summon his constellation, lest he fight him right now. Junwan replied that he understood everything and they would begin. He showed him the constellation. The owner of the Sacred Royal Medallion, responding to the call of the contractor Junwan. When the system reported this, Yaren was surprised. Obsession? Wait, a constellation directly inhabits the contractor's body? What kind of constellation is this? At that moment, magical powers began to emanate from Wolfgang, and a completely transformed deputy appeared in front of him. Yaren was surprised. By the way, who exactly was his constellation? What if it was the owner of the Sacred Royal Medallion, Park Munsu? Munsu spoke, and the secret royal inspector arrived. At that moment, many of Munsu's subordinates appeared around him and surrounded Wolfgang. He frowned and asked, "Does he mean to hit all these things once?" Munsu said he didn't need to worry about them. He only summoned them to draw sacred power. The constellation he contracted with is the one who, the more corrupt and unjust the opponent, releases exponential power to severely punish them. Also, if they are honest, they have nothing to worry about. Wolfgang answered, "Okay," he understood, and swung his fist at Munsu's face. He shouted for him to wait, but before he could, Wolfgang asked, "Is that enough?" Munsu began to dissolve into pixels, and Yaren asked, "What's going on?" She couldn't see anything. She needed to know what was going on here. At that moment, all of Munsu's subordinates disappeared, and she didn't understand why. She saw Wolfgang in the center and wondered, was it over already? Coming closer, Yaren asked, "Is he okay?" Wolfgang replied, "Yes." He was more worried about this guy than himself. Yaren exclaimed, "He's not dead, is he?" Junwan said that wasn't the picture he had in mind. Yaren replied that he was alive, although he didn't look okay. Wolfgang asked, "Is the entrance fee settled now?" She asked again, "Probably." He couldn't forget the entrance fee to the academy, so he should come to the academy's hellish stairs by 9 a.m. on Monday, understood? He shouldn't forget it. Junwan said he didn't feel any evil energy. At this level, he wasn't just expendable. He struck him with his bare hands while he was possessed by the secret royal inspector. That's simply impossible, Wolfgang. Who is he? Could he be a constellation? Or even a higher being? Sometime later, Jinwoo was exercising and turned his gaze in front of him. Magical power appeared around his fist, and he screamed loudly and punched the wall. While he was trying to catch his breath, he saw a red button above. He was getting stronger. A few days later, in the morning, Yaren was climbing the stairs with Wolfgang and Junwan, shouting at him to hurry. He replied that he was trying his best. Yaren said that if he was trying to avoid paying tuition, it wouldn't work. Junwan replied that it wasn't about money. He said it was a consequence of being possessed by a constellation last time. Is he F-Frang? He was lucky, right? He knew about the Sacred Relic destruction incident last week. Because of this, the Hunter license exam for D and F ranks was postponed at the academy, and the registration deadline for admission was also extended by a week. Yaren was surprised and understood what this meant. The man said that normally he would have to take the exams. If he had a license, enrollment could be processed immediately. Since he was an F rank, he would be assigned to an F rank class and could raise his rank to D through the academy's internal exam. Yaren realized how lucky they were to think they were able to enter the academy thanks to the sacred relic destroyed by Mr. Wolfgang. By the way, she heard that for rare classes, such devil hunters, the academy can directly issue licenses here. Is that true? He asked again. Devil hunter? Yes, that's possible. The professor is in charge of devil hunters. Yaren was surprised. Professor? The guy replied, yes, he is also the homeroom teacher for class F, so she will meet him soon. In any case, the review of the documents took a noticeable amount of time until he suggested they go into the classroom. The student's father could also wait there. Once the documents were reviewed, he could pay the entrance fee, which included tuition for 1 semester. Yaren apologized and said that she wasn't the student, but this man. The man exclaimed that it was his mistake. It seemed her father had belatedly realized he was a hunter. She replied that wasn't quite true, and the man apologized and asked when he should talk to someone about the entrance fees. Yaren pointed to Junwan, who was still climbing the stairs, and said, "He's coming. This man will take care of it." Junwan wondered why the school was even located in the middle of the mountains. After a while, they walked together. and the man asked if his father had any weapons or equipment that he usually used. Wolfgang replied that he used a longsword, and Yeren asked, but do they even need personal weapons for F-rank hunters? The man replied that, regardless of rank, they must attend specialized classes. Yeren replied that if she had known, she would have told Jiho she would hand over the sword later. Wolfgang replied that it didn't matter. He could use it whenever he needed. Yeren asked again, he can use it whenever he needs. What does that mean? At that moment, a strong wind picked up and a guy flew past her. She said it was dangerous, and the guy pointed to the side and shouted that it was the professor. He tried to stop him, and the professor turned slightly and asked, did he call him? The guy said that if he was going to the academic building, he should please take one student with him. This student had applied for admission today and was a candidate for devil hunters and was also under his supervision. Sunchul asked again, is that true? They had 2 candidates for devil hunters this semester. The guy waved and said that he could go after this person. Wolfgang said it was time for them to part ways, and Yeren asked again, will he be okay? Wolfgang asked her not to worry. She asked, he knows how to use a phone, right? If anything happens, he should call her. He's also not allowed to do anything the academy forbids, especially not to hit people. He's not allowed to cause any trouble under any circumstances. Wolfgang silently walked away, and Yeren asked, he'll improve, right? She hoped he'd adapt well. Junwon replied that anyone watching would think she was sending her child off to the army. She screamed angrily. What is he talking about? The guy watched from the sidelines and said that they needed to go and pay for their child's tuition. Yeren exclaimed that they weren't his parents. After a while, she passed a wall of portraits and asked, is this some kind of hall of fame? Junwon muttered something like that. These are the top graduates of each class, and he was in the 10th class. He pointed to Jinson and said, this guy was the top graduate of the 10th class. Their scores were similar, but his score for physical strength was a bit off. So unfortunately he missed out on first place. His physical strength was truly unmatched. He'd probably heard of him, a foreign contractor, a constellation from one of the country's leading conglomerate families. He could have lived a comfortable life, but he's truly an outstanding guy. She exclaimed that she now remembered, Hunter Jinson. He even signed a contract with the constellation for his entire family. Junwon asked, but what was the point? He was always worried because he couldn't live up to his father's expectations. Yeren asked, maybe they had family problems? He replied that succeeding as a hunter was his family's cherished desire, and it was also his dream, but he believed his father had forced it upon him. Yeren asked, he seems to know a lot about the affairs of other families, and Junwon replied that it was one of his long-standing interests. At that moment, a man approached them and thanked them for waiting. Junwon's deputy, he's recommending Wolfgang for the scholarship, right? He replied that it was correct. For students recommended by the agency, the entrance fee and tuition for the first semester are waived, right? He would like to apply. Yeren said, so that's what it means. Junwon, of course, where would he get the money? If he had that kind of money, he would first buy a car, right? The guy said that then they would need additional documents. Please let them go inside for a minute. Junwon asked, she wasn't going to leave someone without a car, right? Please let her wait for him. Yeren frowned and replied that she understood everything, so let him just hurry up and sign the papers. This manager, she was grateful that he was paying for the tuition, but why was it so hard to like him? In any case, she decided to put it aside. She was worried about something else. Hunter Jinsun was quite famous, but why did he suddenly disappear? When Junwon entered the office, he asked, is there anyone here? The administrator announced that it was enrollment time and that he should come and sit down. He'd have his documents ready shortly. Junwon approached the table and apologized to the guy. He didn't understand who it was because he had a feeling he'd seen him somewhere before. Suddenly, he realized who it was and shouted, it's him, Jinson. What's he doing here? Jinson frowned and said nothing. Yeren informed him that he was an elite, the heir to a large conglomerate who had managed to secure a family-level contract. If she remembered correctly, he was very promising. Why hadn't she seen him lately? And she'd definitely never seen him in person, but he strangely resembled someone she'd seen before. At that moment, Jinwoo appeared in the same building and said that it was driving him crazy. Seriously, he doesn't want to go in there. It's not like he can just turn around and leave. But why, of all things, does it have to be a devil hunter? Seriously, he feels so crushed. The professor approaches him and asks why he thinks that. Jinwoo turns around abruptly and asks who he is. Seonchul replies that it's his office. Jinwoo replies, the homeroom teacher of the F-rank devil hunter major? The professor confirms with a smile that it's true. And he must be the same student, Jinwoo, who applied to be a devil hunter this semester, right? So what's wrong with being a devil hunter? Jinwoo replies that, frankly, he knows how it is. It's not an exciting battle with demons. They're more like bloodhounds chasing their own tails. The professor says that's not entirely wrong, but there's a slight misunderstanding. It's true that their primary duties are tracking demons, but they don't avoid combat. In fact, they have to deal with them even earlier than the average hunter. At that moment, he saw Wolfgang and was dumbfounded. He realized that this freak was the same one, and started running and screaming. How dare he show himself to him? Because of him, does he even know what he had to go through? Because of him? Wolfgang grabbed him in his arms and stopped him. He pinned him against the wall and threw him aside, after which he said that he, too, was sent by the Holy Star Guild. He said that he was sent to the main one, if he had anything to say to him. Jinwoo shouted, What kind of nonsense are you spouting, you damn freak? Let him go immediately. This is not a battle. This is a medieval problem-solving method. At that moment, the professor directed his magical powers at him and bright rays of light appeared around them. Jinwoo continued shouting for him to let go because he would break his arm. Wolfgang asked, "Professor, what is he doing?" Seonchul laughed and said that he thought they should separate them. How about this? He doesn't want to lose the students he's assigned after so long. Fights like this at the academy are grounds for expulsion. So why don't they spar under his supervision? It seems they have some kind of history, so he doesn't think they'll listen even if he tries to stop them. After a while, they found themselves outside, and Junwon asked Jinwoo how he was doing. He replied that he didn't think he had a reason to tell him. Should he answer just because he asked? Junwon replied that he was the same as before. Let him ask him one thing. Are they guys still chasing that power? If so, he should stop right now. That's the last piece of advice he can give him as a former friend. Jinwoo silently looked into the distance and said, he should get rid of that useless horse tag himself, right? He can't even use it most of the time. Junwon said that might be true, but it wasn't useless. No other sacred relic could have such a powerful effect on someone who had made a contract with a demon. Jinwoo said that even after all this time, he wasn't happy to see him. He suggested they avoid each other again if possible. Junwon watched him go with a sad expression, and Yerin asked, what happened to those people? Were they really friends? Wolfgang asked again, telling them to fight and only use the power of the constellation. Is that something a professor should say? He replied that they both applied for the Devil Hunter class, right? Those are people who track demons, and only those who can clearly use the power of the constellation can discern and find demons' traces. Therefore, if they can't otherwise manipulate the power of the constellations, they can't become devil hunters. That's why he deliberately took this opportunity to test them both. Wolfgang asked again, what if they can only fight using methods other than the power of the constellation? The professor smiled and replied that, unfortunately, they would most likely be transferred to another class or have their applications revoked. Jinwoo asked again, what, old man? He applied to become a devil hunter without even knowing it? Wolfgang replied that he would ask one more thing then. Should all their actions be performed using the power of the constellation? Seonchul explained that since today was just a test, as long as there was no direct physical contact between them, he permitted other methods, but they still shouldn't forget that this was sparring, after all. He believed that minor injuries were inevitable, but they should not maim their opponent or endanger their life. Student Jinwoo, does he have any questions? He shouted that he wanted to get started already and smiled because he wanted to smash that face in as soon as possible. At that moment, he shouted at the old man to watch out and slammed the metal cart, saying that he would pay a heavy price for getting in his way. At that moment, the professor tensed and closed his eyes from the bright light, when suddenly a strong wind and smoke appeared on their field. Jinwoo asked how he could handle it. He tried to imitate a fireball. Wolfgang replied that it would ruin his clothes, which was problematic. Jinwoo shouted that if it was problematic, then he should give in. Who knows? Maybe if he begged, he'd forgive him. Wolfgang told him to talk in a second, and Jinwoo shouted, why is he stalling? If he can't win, then he should admit defeat and kneel. Wolfgang frowned and looking down said that it looked like he'd have to hit him to make him listen. He'd give him 1 minute to do his best. Meanwhile, Junwon left the room and handed Yerin the documents, saying that here was a document confirming full tuition payment. She thanked him and said they could leave now. Suddenly, Yerin called him over and asked if she could ask him something. He said yes, and Yerin asked if something had happened between him and that person back in their academy days. The atmosphere between the two of them seemed strange. He asked again, isn't that what usually happens with rivals? A love-hate relationship where they like each other and hate each other. Something like that. She asked again, is that still the case? Even though it's been several years since they graduated? He supposed so. Maybe time doesn't heal all. Yerin exclaimed that it was complicated, and yet it didn't seem like they felt pure hatred for each other. With that, she ran further up the stairs, and Junwon was surprised. So that's how it was. He thought so too. But it seemed like Jinwoo didn't find it easy to say such things. Reconciling with an old friend was a difficult task. When Jinwoo asked, how was he? Wolfgang gave him 1 minute to do everything he could. At that moment, a fierce struggle broke out between them. Bright flashes of light erupted all around, and a thick cloud of dust rose, making the boys invisible. The professor became afraid for them and started shouting, is Wolfgang overdoing it? He'd clearly warned him about this. Wolfgang replied that because of this jerk, his contract with the constellation had been completely destroyed. He didn't know what he'd done, but this jerk had ruined everything. He needed to focus on minimizing the damage first, and they had better pray that the other side didn't suffer too much. When the professor directed a bright beam of light in their direction, silence fell, and Wolfgang uttered a curse, completely ruining his clothes. The durability of these garments was quite low. He apologized for a moment, and with his hand, he passed into a magical portal, asking Jongyun to lend him his clothes the Fenrir skin too. He became scared and asked, what the hell is that? Is that Wolfgang's voice? Jiho confirmed that it seemed so. She hadn't known he had such abilities. He grabbed the clothes, covered himself with them, and tossed the monster skin to the ground. Jinwoo asked again what skill he'd just used, and what kind of beast skin was that. Wolfgang sank to the ground and said something had been bothering him for some time, a tattoo engraved on his arm. It was the power of a demon. At that moment, he swung his arms, leaping off the ground and landing right behind his opponent. Wolfgang leaned over and began screaming, destroying everything around him. Jinwoo's arm began to ache violently, and the professor exclaimed, "What's going on?" A red tattoo had indeed appeared on his arm, and Wolfgang asked why the guardian of the underworld was attached to him. He thought, Jinwoo, he'll hold him fully accountable for terminating his contract with the constellation. Let him make the contract. It's the only way to regain his power. Jinwoo spoke fearfully. Cerberus was a demon, and yet asking him to make a contract with a demon was serious. He would demand a high price from him. How could he do such a thing? He refused, because he couldn't do such a thing. But the voice told him that he had to, because if he didn't, he would die. Jinwoo shouted for everyone to run away from here, because they would be eaten, and they would all die. Wolfgang closed his mouth and said that he would kill them, all of them, but he mustn't let fear consume him. No one would die today, and the more he feared, the stronger it became, and then it would undoubtedly demand payment from him. This would be his life force. He had witnessed countless souls who had made contracts with demons and didn't want to see such tragedies repeated. He should calm his breathing and look this beast straight in the eyes. Jinwoo said in a trembling voice that he couldn't do this, but Wolfgang said that he would deliberately show him that relying on a demon's power was never the true path to strength. This year, both Devil Hunter candidates were quite intriguing. What the hell was that skin the old man pulled out? What was that terrifying aura? The professor backed away, and Jinwoo couldn't understand what it was. A voice wondered why the scent in the wind had changed, and it was him, Wolfgang. Wolfgang said it was his old friend, Fenrir, and didn't think it was time to check if his fangs had rusted. Fenrir replied that his body was motionless, and an opponent who had already lost all will to fight was calling him after so long, and this favor he was asking of him was a trivial matter. Wolfgang answered no. He had summoned him to announce that they were starting all over again, because he had learned that demons remained active even in this modern era. However, millennia had passed, and it seemed he was still firmly bound by the chains of the past. He should deal with this dog himself, and in the meantime, he would return and gather his strength. He would also inform their comrades that he had returned to them. He replied that he understood everything, his friend Fenrir, and they would see each other next time. Jinwoo was surprised that the wolf had just spoken. What had he just seen? Yeren, meanwhile, had approached the car and suddenly shouted at Junwon to hurry up and come here. She was incredibly busy. Her entire schedule was delayed because the settlement was taking too long. He answered yes and then asked again, "Hunter Yeren?" He looked to the side and realized, that thing over there, doesn't it look incredibly familiar? Wolfgang believed this was the right direction, and that was what he needed. It arrived so slowly that it truly lived up to its antique status, and that was his purpose. At that moment, he smashed everything bloody with a huge sword and stuck it straight into the ground. Forming a contract with a demon is not illegal. Other hunter classes rarely do such things, but devil hunters sometimes make contracts with demons. Sometimes this makes tracking demons much easier. And he's curious, Jinwoo. His older brother was one of the most promising next-generation hunters, and his father was a renowned martial artist and the owner of a major conglomerate, right? So why did he make a contract with a demon? With his background, acquiring the sacred religion necessary for the contract shouldn't have been difficult. Jinwoo asked again. Did he really have to answer? The professor said that if he didn't care whether he became a devil hunter or not, it wasn't necessary. But if he did, he had to do it. A contract with a demon could instantly grant him immense power, but it was also extremely unfair. As his handler, he should know what he was dealing with. For example, the contract he made with Cerberus required half of the contractor's remaining life, and how dangerous is that? Wolfgang screamed that this was even more serious than he thought, a contract that was devouring his life. Jinwoo asked again, what if he was an unwanted child? When his brother successfully entered into a contract with a constellation known as the descendant of Barbarian, the entire family celebrated. They were already a prestigious martial arts family with more than enough money. Signing a contract with a foreign constellation became the main topic of conversation. They were in such a good position that becoming the greatest family in Korea was only a matter of time. Now his father was firmly associated with a businessman. Becoming a legendary martial artist had always been his lifelong dream. The contract with the constellation even expanded to a contract with the entire family, and it seemed his father's dream was finally coming true. The entire family celebrated, but the second son, who had always been a disappointment to the family and whose lack of talent caused a disaster, terminated his contract. If not for that jerk, everything would have been different. Wolfgang asked again, what was his fault? Then he asked if he could ask if he was angry because he called his constellation by its proper name instead of addressing it properly. He replied no, it was simply the ignorance of a child who couldn't recognize Wolfgang despite having borrowed the barbarian's power. He acted out of ignorance, and please forgive him. His punishment ended when he challenged him, and everything after that concerned only the two of them. He asked him this time that this child was clearly using his power incorrectly. Shouldn't something be done about it? The man replied of course he had already planned. Wolfgang said that he never thought it would end with the contract being broken, but he was already beginning to doubt his contract with his family. Jinwoo screamed, hitting his chest, that it was impossible. Maybe he wasn't good enough. His brother was a genius among geniuses. If anyone deserved to lose the contract because he wasn't good enough, it should have been him alone. Wolfgang said that he didn't know his brother well enough to say for sure, but he knew one thing. He hadn't used the Barbarian's power properly. It wasn't about talent, it was how he used it. If he and his family used this power the same way, then the Barbarian simply never suited their family. Jinwoo screamed. What was he talking about? How was he using the power incorrectly? He'd already said that he might not have been a genius, but his brother certainly was. At that moment, Jinsun rushed into the room and Jinwoo screamed in fear. Brother? Jinsun yelled that he was a freak and told him to come out here immediately. Meanwhile, Yeren was strolling around the city and yelled at Junwan to act faster. It would be disastrous if Wolfgang made another scene, and it would also reflect badly on him. He had no strength at all and kept muttering, "Damn stairs." At that moment, Jinsun dragged Jinwoo along with him, screaming that he was wrong and apologizing, because he would somehow figure something out. Let him stop, brother. Jinsun dragged him along the ground by his shirt and threw him right onto the street, causing him to scream in pain. Tears appeared on Jinwoo's face, and Jinsun yelled, "Stop crying, you little bastard. His hobby is breaking contracts. Didn't he tell him it would ruin him? He ruins everything and then just stands there like an idiot. He worked so hard to show him a way to survive and got him into the academy, and then he breaks another contract. Is it really that hard to just do what he's told?" He started kicking him in the stomach while the professor kept saying with a smile that they never got around to talking about Wolfgang because of Jinsun. He asked again, "Is there a problem?" Seonchul asked again, "A problem? If that's what you call a problem, it's a big one." Wolfgang asked again, "What's the matter?" He replied that he had to become a devil hunter, so if there was a problem, he wanted to hear about it right now. The professor said no. In fact, it was just the opposite. At that moment, he remembered their battle when Wolfgang asked him to say something. Jinwoo shouted at him. Why was he stalling? And the professor asked, "Did he already know this then, didn't he?" Wolfgang answered correctly. He had sensed the demonic energy even earlier, but at that moment he was completely convinced. Seonchul smiled and said that, frankly, when it came to using constellation abilities, he was better than any active devil hunter. And yet, he sensed the demonic energy around Jinwoo much later than he did. In fact, even after he sensed the demonic energy, he still didn't know it was a Cerberus. Until that Cerberus left Jinwoo's body, there was also spatial distortion, summoning magic, and even something similar to telekinesis was there too. He smiled and asked why he came to the academy. He had never seen a hunter who could use so many different abilities so easily. Wolfgang asked him to get to the point, and Seonchul asked, once the promotion exam opened, how about retaking it and skipping a grade? If his goal was to become a devil hunter as soon as possible, he would recommend doing that instead of attending classes. He wasn't sure if he was busy or if he still had a lot to learn. Seonchul said that this was the only thing he regretted, but before he could finish, Wolfgang patted him on the shoulder and told him to wait. At that moment, Jinsun was beating up Jinwoo, yelling that he was ruining everything, and then just standing there like an idiot. Yeren ran up to Jinwoo to save him and asked what he was doing and why he was beating him up. Jinsun yelled at her to move away. Who was she to interfere? Junwan grabbed him by the shoulders and asked him to stop because he would kill him. Wasn't this his little brother? Jinsun yelled. Why was he sticking his nose in where it didn't belong? He should let him go. Junwan yelled at him to calm down first. Was he really trying to beat him to death? What had happened to him? He was never like this. Jinsun yelled. Why did he even care? If he didn't do it, then that brat would. But before he could finish, Junwan slapped him across the cheek with his hand, and everyone around him froze. Hunters are forbidden from fighting outside the fields or dungeons. Fighting inside the academy can even lead to expulsion. More importantly, he had dragged away his student right in front of him, without even asking. So the professor suggested he stop immediately. Otherwise, he would view his actions with hostility, and then they would have to fight him. Jinsun asked again, did he just say his student? After all, his younger brother hadn't even made a contract with a constellation or a demon yet, and he was saying he would accept him into the academy? Seonchul replied that whether he was a contracted hunter or not didn't matter. It had no bearing on his studies. Their gazes met and Jinsun muttered, his younger brother, please let him enroll. With that, he walked away. He asked if she was sure he could stay here. The guys were in the infirmary in Building F. Seonchul turned around and said that the gaming academy had installed various magical barriers, including healing magic. So if the wound wasn't severe, healing would occur quickly. But he thought the real problem might be in the heart of student Jinwoo. Yeren said that it was probably because of his older brother, the hunter Jinsun, right? What exactly happened? The professor thought for a moment and remembered how Jinwoo had shouted that it was impossible. Maybe he wasn't good enough, but his brother was a genius among geniuses, and when he recalled their dialogue, Jinwoo had argued that he was using his power correctly. He had already said that he might not be a genius, but his brother definitely was. And when Jin-sun entered the room and heard about this, he was very surprised. He asked permission to enroll and left. Seonchul thought about one thing for sure. There were internal circumstances known only to the two of them. At that moment, Wolfgang entered the office and announced he was leaving. Yeren asked if he'd taken the Cerberus's corpse. Wolfgang answered correctly, telling her to leave it alone, because the demon was greeted by a disgusting aura even after death. After some time, Jin-seon discussed the situation with Junwan, who was shouting, "What's wrong with him and why did he do this?" This was the academy. They could have talked and sorted it out at home. He was his brother, family. Jin-seon confirmed, that's right, it was a family matter, so he shouldn't get involved. Junwan replied that the way he was changing was connected to his recent disappearance. Jin-seon told him not to jump to conclusions, because he had his reasons for everything. Junwan asked again, what reasons? What reason could there be to justify beating up his younger brother? Jin-seon told him to go to hell with his detective games. After this conversation, he got in the car and drove away. But when Junwan approached the car, Jin-seon rolled down the window and asked why he stopped digging into his father's past. Junwan replied that it was because he left the association. Jin-seon said that the Hunters Association knew about it, that his father had touched that power, right? Junwan replied that this was probably true. They didn't know the details, and he left it out of the report. If they found out, the Hunters Association would be unhappy that he was using demonic power. He said this, meaning he didn't report it to the association because of him, right? Should he thank him, or should he hate him? With this question, he closed the window and drove away in an unknown direction. After some time, Jongyeon asked, does he want to make armor out of Cerberus's corpse? Wolfgang answered correctly. He wanted to meet an artificial blacksmith. Did he know anyone nearby he could introduce him to? Yeren asked him to explain that she didn't really understand this strange matter. He asked again, where should he begin his explanation? Jongyeon continued to say that in their time, they don't place orders directly with blacksmiths. There are separate companies that produce hunting equipment. He asked, so he should visit one of these companies? Jongyeon replied, no, he simply buys it at the market registered with the Hunters Association. He sells materials like this Cerberus corpse at the market and buys equipment with the money. Yeren asked if they could take a photo of it first and list it for sale at the market for her. She rarely uses the market, so her transaction fees are high. Jongyeon replied that he understood and would list it at the market, in exchange for her helping him with his research later. Yeren replied with a smile, okay. Jonghyun turned to Wolfgang and concluded that once the goods listed at the market are sold, what equipment should they buy with the money? Wolfgang replied that he didn't know, as it wasn't what he needed. The men didn't understand what he meant. After a while, the man asked again. The Cerberus skin was being put on display at the market. But what about Jinwoo's? His subordinate replied that young Master Jinwoo hadn't returned from the academy, and it was definitely on display. The man asked again, what do you mean, didn't return? The man confirmed that it was true. There had been a battle with a man named Wolfgang at the academy, and they said that Cerberus had been destroyed in that battle. Confirming this, young Master Jinson beat young Master Jinwoo, and afterward, young Master Jinwoo ended up in the academy's infirmary. The man was surprised. Wolfgang, let him call a cleaner and let them take care of it without anyone knowing. It would be better this way. Although no, if they want to preserve Jinson's sanity, they'll have to somehow spare Jinwoo's life. Let him return Jinwoo immediately, and he'll decide on his punishment later. Jinson, standing behind the wall and eavesdropping, was observing all of this. Suddenly, the man stopped and immediately came out from behind the wall to Jinson and asked if he was still eavesdropping on him. Jinson replied that he hadn't heard anything and had just arrived. The man said he didn't need to pretend he knew anything. There was nothing to be afraid of. Jinson apologized to his father, and the man said that this man would soon awaken. When that happened, power over this world would belong to their family. Jinson frowned deeply and said he would be the first to pass. At that moment, Taegwon called the chief's secretary and asked him to keep a close eye on Jinson. Meanwhile, Jinwoo was lying on his bed, and Jinson approached him. Jinwoo jumped up abruptly and exclaimed, what is this? Jinseon replied that it was a Cerberus tattoo. He should get it on his body. Then he would be able to make a contract with Cerberus. When this appears, he must agree to the contract, no matter what it demands. It won't be as powerful as his previous constellation, but if he becomes a devil hunter using Cerberus's power, he can easily rise to around a C-rank hunter. Jinwoo jumped aside and said no, he didn't want to. He would work hard to forge a contract with the constellations again. He knew he was a true sinner, so how could he ask him to forge a contract with a demon? Jinsun replied, no, let him listen to him. He must do it right now. If he doesn't, he will truly die. Doesn't he know what happens when he falls out of favor with his father? He's someone who would even kill his own children without a second thought. And that's really the bare minimum. Forging a contract with a demon is what his father would actually prefer. He spent the past few years working hard to awaken that power, and as a result, it looks like they'll soon possess a power that even the Hunter Association won't be able to ignore. He asked, brother, he said. Can you talk to that friend from the Hunters Association he told you about and stop my father? People say Cerberus demands half his life just for signing a contract, and that's too much. Jinseon replied that he couldn't do that. If that happened, his friend would definitely die. Please, let him just do as he says, because that's the only way for everyone to survive. Now Jinwoo recalled those words, and with tears in his eyes, he uttered the word brother. At that moment, Wolfgang extended his hand through the portal toward Jinwoo, who began to scream in fear. Is that a ghost? Wolfgang asked him to stick his head out and let himself be caught quietly. Jinwoo asked again, what do you mean? Let yourself be caught? Why was he doing that? Let him go. Meanwhile, Jinseon, hooded, ran to the stairs and realized he had to act quickly before his father acted. At that moment, the professor stretched and was just about to finish his work when he suddenly saw Jinseon running past. He asked why Master Jinseon was here. Jinseon ran into the hospital room and saw that Jinwoo was nowhere to be found. This must be the right place, right? He looked around and realized that Jinwoo really was gone, and he hadn't even thought about it. Where did he go? Suddenly, magical powers appeared around him, and he started screaming. What? The professor approached him and said that he suspected as much. But it really was him, Jinseon. He should follow him quietly if he didn't want to make a scene. Meanwhile, Jinwoo started screaming. Who the hell was he, and why did he keep approaching him? Wolfgang said that he would make him his first subordinate. First, he needed to take his measurements, so he should undress. Jinwoo exclaimed, What? What does subordinate mean, and why should he undress? Wolfgang replied that doesn't he want to make a contract with a constellation instead of a demon, and if he meets the requirements, then he tells the Barbarian's descendants to forge a contract with him again. Jinwoo asked again, really? He could forge a contract with the Barbarian's descendant again? Wolfgang replied that he couldn't give him a definitive answer, but if he became a warrior worthy of his recognition, then it would be justified. Jinwoo was dumbfounded and began shouting that he would do it, and that he would please tell him what kind of warrior he should become. Wolfgang replied that from that moment on, he would be reborn as the strongest shield warrior. Jinwoo asked again, What? What warrior? His expression expressed confusion. After a while, Jongyeon said he'd taken all the measurements. He just needed to find equipment that would fit this guy, right? And Wolfgang replied, That's right, a shield. They needed a large shield that would fit his size, and the rest was unimportant. Jongyeon realized they'd just received a request from the market for a Cerberus carcass. Looks like they can make a shield now. Is there anything they should consider? He replied that they needed to look at the item itself first, and Yeren asked, Right now? He confirmed, yes, and Jinwoo, carrying a huge sack, asked who bought it at the market. It wasn't their father, right? He hoped not. Yeren replied that she'd received a message from a professor at the academy. After a while, the professor told Jinseon to tell him everything now. He'd gone to get the devil's mark again, and he was trying to force his little brother to sign a contract with the devil again? Did he even realize how much of a price he'd have to pay for it? It seemed like he didn't want to be responsible for it. Jinseon replied that it was for the best. Sanchul insisted that it wouldn't solve anything, that it would be better for him to leave home, and that he was ready to help if problems arose. Jinseon replied that he didn't need to do that, because even he couldn't handle it. The professor said he'd heard that student Jinwoo was currently with the archaeological hunters, and Wolfgang was with them, and he thought he could see him if he talked to Mr. Junwan, but he wouldn't accept student Jinwoo. At that moment, Jinseon started shouting, Why this? He said he'd accept him. Seonchul remarked that devil hunters are the ones who must withstand the power of demons at close range, and even as comrades who can be trusted with their lives, one must be prepared to die. How could he trust someone who treated the academy as a refuge? He could help them use the academy as a refuge, but first he needed an explanation. What was happening to them now? He replied that all of that was in the past. People who made contracts with powerful constellations are now powerful. Even if his father was a famous martial artist, he wasn't chosen by the constellation. He now owns a large corporation, but this is the era of constellations and hunters. He keeps saying that there are things that can't be bought, even with money. Of course, he signed a contract with a foreign constellation, but even that was recently terminated. This invitation to a meeting organized by high-ranking hunters is the first invitation he's received in 15 years since successfully signing the contract. But when rumors spread that his contract was terminated, he was told not to come. His father isn't the type to sit idly by after something like that happened, and he thinks he can guess because of what he already said, Professor. Seonchul replied that he made a contract with a demon, and a very powerful one. Jinseon replied that it wasn't something any of them could handle alone. The only one who could stop him from having his father captured by the demon's power was the Hunter Association. But will the association act? The professor understood better. But why was he doing this to Jinwoo? If he broke the contract with the constellation, his father would simply scold him. Did he really have to go that far with his little brother? Jinseon replied that his father had already been consumed by a demon, and that he had barely managed to stop it from killing Jinwoo after he had fallen from grace. He had offered Jinwoo the demon's power and thought his father would leave him alone if he used it. He hit Jinwoo because it was obvious his father would intervene if he didn't, so he tried to stop it on his own level. But his father called a cleaner, and when he said this, the professor screamed. Did he just say cleaner? Aren't they a criminal organization and their people are as strong as A-rank hunters? Is he saying they're going to Korea? Jinseon replied, that's exactly what he was saying. Even he couldn't handle them, Professor. You won't stop him if he wants to blame him, but he did everything he could to the best of his ability. It's better than letting Jinwoo die right now. The professor said that if this is true, then he believes he really can't handle it. Jinseon replied that if he still had a contract with the constellation, none of this would have happened. Their father wouldn't have changed so much. But even if Jinwoo did something wrong, he couldn't stand by and watch his father hurt his little brother. He had to put this to an end no matter the cost because it concerns their family. The next day, Jinwoo stood in front of a happy Jongmyeon, who informed him that it wasn't a sacred relic, but a pretty good shield. He was sure he would find good use for it. Wolfgang tossed the shield above himself and said that it was light and durable, making it perfect for his first shield. Jinwoo replied, perplexed, that when he looked at it up close, it wasn't that good. There were so many cool weapons around, like spears and hammers. Wolfgang said that Jinwoo needed to know his limits. No matter what weapon he used, he wouldn't be able to even scratch the demon. But defense was a different story. If he focused on defense, he could at least guarantee his survival. Jinwoo asked again, what did that mean? Did he mean he wasn't good enough? Wolfgang replied yes, he wasn't using his full power. He had a decent punch, but he couldn't defeat the demon with a few blows. He needed to learn to channel the power in his body at the right moment. If he had done that when he caught it during the duel, it wouldn't have reacted like that, and he wouldn't have had to use the demon's power. Jinwoo silently looked at the shield and thought. After a while, a strong wind appeared in Chairman Taegwon's house, and he was incredibly angry. Taegwon thought that these damned freaks from the Hunters Association were useless, worthless, and unimportant. He would become the strongest by using his contract with the Demon Lord. He clenched his fist, and blood poured into a vase, after which a magical seal appeared on the floor. Taegwon shouted, Great Father of Darkness, his humble servant offers him this cup of blood. Let him look upon this old world filled with hypocrisy. He must break the rotten and decaying order of light, open the red eyes of heaven. At that moment, a young man and a woman stood nearby, greatly surprised. The man said that it was finally beginning, that the chairman was about to receive unimaginable power. She replied, that meant he would receive this power too, right? They could use this to make a fortune. Taegwon continued to chant, accept them and the blood as offerings. Open the gates of the sealed abyss and not enter them. Let the Lord of Darkness come. As he chanted this spell, a huge demonic hand burst out of the bowl, and Taegwon screamed with joy when suddenly the hand grabbed him inside and he began screaming for it to stop. A moment later, the monster completely emerged from the bowl and was bound with chains. The boy asked in fear, Chairman? At that moment, the monster pierced the girl's chest with a chain and dragged her along. He killed the girl and continued screaming loudly. The monster muttered, Chief Secretary, he doesn't want this. His body is acting on its own. Something is wrong, and let them call someone. Let them call his son or anyone who can stop this while he's still conscious. When the red moon appeared in the sky, the professor began screaming. What's going on? Jinseon was dumbfounded when he suddenly heard his phone ring. His father's subordinate was calling him in tears, shouting that it was an emergency. Jinseon realized that his father had done it. Sometime later, in the basement of the Archaeologist Hunters Association, the guys were all together, training. Jinwoo asked what kind of training could take place in such a warehouse. Yeren chuckled and replied that they were hunters and archaeologists, so they didn't have a separate room for combat training. Wolfgang said that he needed to calm down first. In combat, he was easily disarmed, causing him to lean forward and lose his balance. This left him completely open to a counterattack, and Jinwoo became alarmed and offered to give it a try. He exhaled with relief, and Wolfgang swung his fist at him, telling him to remain calm and lower his stance. They would start with a light strike. When he struck the count, Yeren realized he'd only punched him. Where did that sound come from? Jinwoo screamed in pain and terror and flew off a bit. He tried to catch his breath and wondered, is this what he called a light strike? Wolfgang replied that it wasn't bad. At least he was still standing, even though he barely touched him. Modern Korea really was not ready for a man built like a fortress and angry like a 1,000-year grudge. An awkward silence fell between the guys, and Wolfgang told them to remember this feeling and their stance he'd observed from the sidelines. Jinwoo replied that he understood, and Wolfgang remarked that he was surprisingly serious when he took on his task. Yeren replied that he was, after all, an expert who scored over 2,000 points on his promotion exam. He asked again, is she talking about that exam that shattered into pieces if he applied even a shred of force? Yeren chuckled at this, and at that moment their phone rang. Jinwoo picked up, and Wolfgang realized his stand had instantly fallen apart. Yeren laughed and said they'd just started when Jinwoo suddenly screamed in fear. What did he say? The guys were frightened by his reaction, and Jinwoo ran out of the room, shouting that he was coming soon, apologizing but needing to go home immediately. Yeren didn't understand what was happening. Had something happened? Wolfgang replied that he had a bad feeling. Meanwhile, the professor shouted, did he perform a demon summoning ritual? And was this a complicated contract? Father's subordinate answered yes, and Jinseon said it was a curse. He was still sane when he left, but if he hurried, maybe he could still stop him. Jinseon replied that it was a family matter and he would go alone. "Professor, please let him report to the Hunters Association." Seon Chol started shouting that once the demon summoning ritual was performed, it was no longer just a family matter, and anyone could report it, right? He was a devil hunter and was going there too. Jin Seon shouted that a report from such a powerful hunter as the professor would force the association to act as quickly as possible. If he or the head secretary went, the association would pay no attention to them. The frightened guy shouted that he would go too, because his wife was there. Jin Seon asked him to calm down, because he would look for her. "Head secretary, please let him call everyone who could help them." They needed to do this quickly, and the guys scattered in different directions. Wolfgang expressed his opinion that something was definitely wrong. He had a bad feeling, and he needed to go. Yeren replied that they were cleaning up the mess he'd made. He wasn't running away just because he didn't want to clean, was he? He replied that wasn't the case, and when he went outside, he saw a dark sky, and Yeren asked, how is that even possible? He felt a foul energy and decided that a demon had appeared. She asked again, "A demon? That didn't make sense." Wolfgang asked again, "But why? Didn't the number one subordinate make a contract with a demon?" She replied that a simple contract differs from the physical manifestation of a demon on Earth, and they don't just appear out of nowhere. He thought things would be different now. It looked like they were ready to launch a full-scale invasion after 1,000 years of waiting. At that moment, Jin Seon ran at incredible speed, thinking that this was a curse and that he hoped he wasn't too late. He opened the doors to the house, when suddenly he felt an earthquake and began screaming in fear. What is that? Bright beams of fiery light began to erupt from the ground, destroying everything around them. He was upset and thinking about his father, when he suddenly opened his eyes and, looking ahead, asked in fear, "What is this? What the hell is happening?" He saw a bright pillar of light that reached the sky and became frightened. Wolfgang, meanwhile, asked Yeren to take refuge in a safe place. She asked him to please be careful. The Hunters Association and other hunters were already on their way, so he shouldn't overdo it. Wolfgang jumped off the ground and rushed to help. He thought about how he would take revenge on this demon, because the last barbarian was coming for them. After a while, when a lot of dust had appeared, Jin-sun tried to catch his breath and shouted, "Father, please don't give in to the demon and pull yourself together." At that moment, a chain was thrown onto him, and the monster pierced him through and through. Taiguan said, "Father, this man no longer exists, but don't despair, because starting with him and his father, he will slaughter every last human." The monster looked horrified at the wounded Jin Seon, who was squatting on the ground unable to move. Sometime later, in the Chinese dungeon, the agile guys dealt with the monsters together and were almost finished. They discussed how they shouldn't let their guard down. Shishao and Yanyan, Chinese A-rank hunters, fought the monster and used dragon breath. Yanyan asked Shishao to stand behind her. At that moment, she threw back the fiery flames and said that it was excellent. She held it back once. At that moment, the monster released its flames again, and Shishao pounced on it, shouting that now it was his turn to finish it off. When he lunged at the monster from above and struck it with his spear, it was knocked aside, and Shishao was glad they had done it. Yanyan exclaimed that they'd been frequenting the A-rank dungeon and that they really were the best. Now the adults would finally acknowledge them. At that moment, blood began to flow from her mouth, and she slumped onto his shoulders. Shishao, terrified for her, screamed, "Who did this?" His body was also cut, and he hadn't even seen it. Opposite them stood the cleaner, who announced that he was in contact and the target had been eliminated. The two A-rank hunters turned out to be nothing. He was heading straight for the next target. The next target on his card was Wolfgang. He didn't know what had suddenly happened in the sky, but this chaos played into his hands. This was only an F-rank target, but if someone had ordered a contract for an F-rank, it meant there was something special about them. He watched Wolfgang and realized he would kill him with one blow. At that moment, he pounced on him from the roof, but Wolfgang managed to parry the attack and tossed the man aside. He cleared his throat, and the boy said he could block the hidden weapon and couldn't stop the poisonous gas. "Sweeper in touch. This target has been eliminated," he said. But before he could finish, he suddenly asked, "Constellation? What does that mean?" Wolfgang appeared behind him and killed the boy. He called him a target, so he definitely inhaled the poison. Wolfgang shouted that he wasn't anyone's target but a hunter, and that he shouldn't interfere with his hunt. At that moment, Jinwoo tried to fight the monster while its chains rushed at him. He protected his brother with his shield and shouted, "Is he okay?" Jinshan replied that he was fine, and that he shouldn't worry about him. Jinwoo realized he was holding it back, but what had Wolfgang said earlier? He needed to keep a low stance and remain calm. Such a powerful explosion would attract other hunters here, and he just needed to hold out until then. At that moment, he collapsed abruptly and was thrown aside along with his brother. Jinwoo jumped up and asked if he was okay. What the hell was going on? Where were these monsters coming from? He looked fearfully into the distance, where a terrible hellish flame appeared underground. Other creatures began to emerge from the ground, and Jinwoo cringed in fear, muttering that this couldn't be true. There were so many of them? The monsters began to roar loudly and pounce on the guys. Jinwoo mentally begged himself to pull himself together. If he gave in, his brother would die now. He began to fight and drew his sword, but the force of the blow caused blood to flow from his mouth. He begged Jinsun to hold on until the other hunters arrived. He screamed loudly and continued to try to fend off the attack, knocking back various monsters with his shield. The last of the monsters lashed out with its tongue and shattered the shield. Jinwoo was frightened and thought he should protect his brother, but he couldn't. Suddenly, he covered his face with his hand and saw a bright flash of light in front of him. He screamed, "What?" At that moment, he opened his eyes and saw Wolfgang's sword. Wolfgang said he had held up well, his #1 subordinate. Jinwoo was dumbfounded, and turning around, realized he was still alive. Wolfgang said he was a man worthy of standing before his comrade with a shield in his hands. Jinwoo still didn't understand what was happening and uttered Wolfgang's name, who began to fight all the attacking monsters alone, screaming loudly. A moment later, when he struck the ground with his sword, it began to crumble and the monsters began to fall straight down. Jinwoo covered his face from the bright light and didn't understand what was happening. The monster pulled out its chains and tried to grab Wolfgang, who said he would take care of these creatures. When the monster created a bright flash of light and tried to destroy him, he screamed at him to tell him everything he knew about the Devil House. Let him answer, and he promised to grant him a quick death. The monster replied, "What funny things are you saying, human? How can a pathetic insect even speak to him in such a tone?" Wolfgang replied that he offered him a chance to die peacefully, but if he refused, he would devour him from existence. The monster declared that he was a pathetic worm and should come and die if he wasn't afraid. He cast the shadow binding spell, and at that moment, Wolfgang began to struggle, calling it a cheap trick. The monster called him a wreck, an ignorant man, and at that moment he clenched his hand into a fist, and Wolfgang screamed in pain and horror. The monster didn't understand. What is this powerful energy? At that moment, magical power began to penetrate the monster, destroying its opponent. Wolfgang struck the monster, sending it flying, but suddenly realized that he had broken free of its shadow. He understands, therefore, that he is an extraordinary person. But at that moment, Wolfgang broke free again and began to destroy his opponent. The monster was surprised and thrown aside. Wolfgang called him weak, so weak he didn't even deserve to remember his name. Damn him, human, for he mocked him, a demon, so they must kill him. He ordered his subordinate monster to rise up and destroy Wolfgang, and Jinwoo shouted at him to watch out. Wolfgang turned sharply to face the monster, clenched his teeth in anger, and then ran towards it. Jinwoo asked, "What?" Jinwoo was convinced of one thing. He absolutely must remain in Wolfgang's good graces. When the monster died and fell to the ground, Jinwoo ran away in his arms with Jinsun and became frightened. Wolfgang asked, "What is he doing, subordinate? He should hurry and take his brother to safety." He replied that he understood the order and thought that thank God he was on their side. Where the hell did this monster come from? This curse! He hadn't planned to use this power yet. At that moment, the monster said, "The shadow of evolution," and tried to strike again, but Wolfgang exhaled and said that he really was full of tricks, and he shouted that they would see how long he could talk like that. The struggle between them continued, but Wolfgang easily repelled the demon's attack and destroyed it piece by piece. Jinwoo screamed, "What's going on?" His body dissipating like smoke. "This is cheating, and he's a damned demon." At that moment, the demon approached Wolfgang's face and said, "Did he really think this would be enough to compete with him? At this rate, he thinks he can just kill him." The monster screamed, "Can he kill him? Is he really still talking like that? Let him just die already, the filthy worm." At that moment, Wolfgang remembered a memory from the past when he addressed Jonas and said, had he ever heard rumors of demons that cannot be hit? Jonas replied that he'd heard rumors that they transformed into shadows or mist to confuse people about their true form. But he shouldn't be too afraid, and Wolfgang asked again, who said he was afraid? Before his warhammer, blessed by angels and the power of lightning, they would be completely helpless. At that moment, a skirmish erupted between them, and the monster asked how a human had managed to block his attack. Was this really a weapon blessed by angels? Wolfgang thanked Jonas and destroyed the monster with his flames. A moment later, the creature began to scream loudly in terror and realized he was human. Damn it, this wouldn't do. Wolfgang replied that he would ask him one last time, where was Devil House? The monster screamed that it was a curse to think he'd lost to such a pathetic human. The monster tried to vanish from the spot, but Wolfgang shouted for it to answer, and the monster screamed in pain and terror as it began to fall into an avalanche. Jinwoo cried out, "Father, is he all right?" Holding his body in his arms, Wolfgang mused that this was his only lead to Devil House. When he turned around, he saw devastation and a girl riding up, shouting for everyone to quickly destroy the remaining otherworldly monsters. When she ordered this, several guys ran out to meet the monsters and began fighting. The girl approached Wolfgang, and he asked who she was. She gave her name, Unha, and said she was the vice chairperson of the Hunters Association. Their hunters would take care of the remaining otherworldly monsters. For now, she asked to accompany them to the Hunters Association. If he wanted information about the demon lord of Devil House, she could provide it. When they arrived at the Hunters Association, he was met by the president of the Hunters Association. He extended his hand in greeting. Wolfgang shook his hand and thought, so that's what he's like. He has an incredible build, and this overwhelming physical strength emanating from him. He really is strong. Wolfgang asked why he'd called him. He replied that he'd get straight to the point. The demon he was looking for, Devil House, was in the underworld. Wolfgang was dumbfounded, realizing what was happening. Zhongwan continued to explain that demons don't tolerate sunlight well, which is why they retreated deep underground, where the sun doesn't penetrate, and built the underworld. It's documented that this place is simply teeming with demons and their monstrous minions. Although fortunately, they'd seen too many demons rising from the underworld here in Korea, he already knew what the underworld was, and he should just tell him where the entrance was. Zhongwan said he wasn't finished yet. Mr. Wolfgang, didn't he break the sacred relic during the hunter rank promotion exam? He also destroyed the barrier that held the Slime King, which the Holy Star Guild was responsible for, allowing him to escape. Then, right before him, a demon was summoned at the academy, and it completely suppressed the cleaner of an incredibly deadly assassin. And now he stands here, completely unharmed after a fight with a demon assassin. Wolfgang asked again, what was he trying to say? Zhongwan replied that an insanely strong man suddenly appeared out of nowhere and didn't even make a contract with a constellation. And the moment this strong man appears, he constantly contacts demons. There are too many coincidences here, right? He needs to verify exactly who he is and what his true motives are. The altar summons constellations, the Chamseongdang altar. The constellation Sun Huano, Tangum Wangom appeared there. Wolfgang asked, was he implying that he was on the demon's side? Tangum replied that wasn't exactly true, he was just testing the waters a little. After a while, Unha said it was time for him to go. Was he checking him out so thoroughly because he posed a serious threat? At that moment, she asked, is he finished? Meanwhile, Zhongwan was thrown back into the office and was trying to catch his breath. She exclaimed, Chairman? Wolfgang said that for the so-called chairman of the association, he was pathetically weak. They didn't understand what was going on, and Unha started screaming. The chairman is the absolute pinnacle of South Korean hunters. He better show some damn respect when speaking to him. Wolfgang replied that he only called the weak weak. She became angry, and the system reported that the constellation of the dynasty's emperor's concubine was revealing itself according to the pain of contracture. Zhongwan shouted at her, what should she do about this? This is a man, but she ignored him and kissed him. How dare he spew such insolence at the chairman of the association? He's just an insignificant person. She told the chairman that she had taken care of him, but at that moment, Zhongwan exclaimed, Vice President, from behind. Wolfgang pounced on her with his fists, and Zhongwan was simply dumbfounded with horror. When Wolfgang destroyed Unha and approached Zhongwan, he said that he would now give him information about the underworld. Sometime later, the demon Devil House was in the 3rd floor of the underworld, and his subordinate approached him and said he had a favor to ask. Devil House asked again, were they really that close? He replied that he was still fixated on the past. Devil House said that after losing his entire army millennia ago, it was hardly appropriate to hear this from a freak who usurped his territory. The monster told him to stop, because he would give him very interesting information. He encountered a barbarian on the surface, and he was actively hunting him. What about him? Isn't he interested? He replied, he understood and will help him. Judging by his pitiful state, he knows exactly what he's going to ask. He wants him to guarantee his safe return to his territory, right? Let him come closer. The monster grinned and said he was grateful, and that once he recovered, he would even help him descend to a sector deeper than the 3rd floor of the underworld. The demon spoke up, saying, he's talking about a deeper sector. That sounds good. At that moment, he used his magic power on him, and the monster screamed, he's a freak. Did he really do that? Devil House cast an absolute spell, and the monster screamed that he was a damned idiot. Devil House laughed and screamed, how stupid is he? Did he really believe the demon's words? He was truly pathetic. After that, he threw the monsters aside, petrified, and they lay motionless. Devil House would decide to put this aside, meaning he was still alive. That damn barbarian. Wolfgang looked into the distance and muttered, they guys aren't strong enough to fight demons. Isn't there anyone stronger here? Zhongwana replied that other countries were full of hunters stronger than him. But unfortunately, here in South Korea, he was considered one of the absolute strongest. Wolfgang replied, is that so? Then there's no one here who can immediately help. In that case, he has no choice but to descend to the underworld alone. Zhongwan said, Mr. Wolfgang, there's no need to rush things. The demon did appear today, but it's a highly irregular anomaly, and it's highly unlikely that any problems will arise. Wolfgang muttered something was wrong, and Zhongwan asked, is there a problem? He replied that it had been quite some time since he was killed. But why hadn't the darkness dissipated at all? At that moment, the ground began to shake, and Zhongwan exclaimed, what's going on? Wolfgang realized the aura was familiar and saw a bright beam of light again. A new demon emerged from this light. The Soul Demon, a volcano demon, appeared in the region of appearance. A Batwing demon also appeared in the Daejeon region. And an Astaroth demon appeared in the Paju region. When Zhongwan saw this, he began to scream, have demons really appeared again? Wolfgang replied that they had. At that moment, he jumped straight from the window and, grabbing his weapon, began to destroy the demons. He realized that the demons were appearing one after another. Could it be that the demon invasion had begun again? Things were bad for them. Zhongwan, watching what was happening, said that it was incredible. This was the 75th floor, after all. Yuna exclaimed that he had actually engaged in battle with such an enemy. So what should he do now? He suggested that they hurry after him first. 10 minutes ago, in the Blue Dragon clan's estate in Gyeonggi province, the Blue Dragon clan's heiress, Yuna, was training with a spear. She angrily threw the spear aside and slammed it into a tree. Yuna realized that this wasn't enough. She needed to become stronger, much stronger. As the heiress of the Blue Dragon clan, she had to improve. Wasn't the Blue Dragon a family renowned for its hunters? The same Blue Dragon led by a master spearman? Damn it, she'd let those around her get to her, smiling like a fool. Had she already made a temporary contract with the constellation? The Blue Dragons lived up to their name. She must earn the constellation's approval again and forge a real contract. She just needed to keep training. When another opportunity presented itself, she wouldn't let it pass. She grabbed a shelf and realized her palm was hurting. At that moment, a man approached her and said that this was a magnificent technique, and he thought it was time to hand over the position of clan leader to her. She screamed, "Father!" He replied with tears in his eyes that seeing how she'd grown, he could die without regret. His daughter had already become an adult. Sun Yun clapped his hands, and when Yuna approached him, she told him not to say that, because she knew better than anyone how much she still needed. She still had to earn her constellation's recognition again. Sun Yun asked again, when did their little Yuna grow so big? She asked him to stop doing that and asked if something had happened today. It was quite noisy outside. Sun Yun understood that she was already stressed enough and didn't need to hear about what was happening in that direction. He replied, "Nothing important, just something." But before he could finish, they turned around in fear at a loud roar. They ran outside with frightened faces and saw a demon in front of them. Father realized what it was, and Yuna started screaming. "What's going on?" He told her to quickly run into the house and immediately contact the Hunters Association. It was a demon. The demon said she would ask him one question. Where is the Barbarian? The Devil House monster ordered the three of them to go to the surface and find the Barbarian. One of them asked how they were supposed to find him. Devil House replied that he was the biggest brute running around waving a weapon. They had to find him and bring him to him, do it and be rewarded. They knew the Barbarian was somewhere here. Who would be crazy enough to rush straight at him? Volcanus? At that moment, he heard a loud scream and turned around, when suddenly Wolfgang pounced on him. He realized that this was an incredibly accurate description. He screamed, "How dare he come here?" At that moment, the monster laughed and said that it looked like he would be the one to receive this reward. He grabbed Wolfgang and tried to destroy him, but nothing worked. Meanwhile, the demon tried to destroy Sun Yun, and he realized that he was a C-rank hunter. How did they manage to suppress him? She kept saying he was surprisingly strong for a human. She gave him credit, and now he had to tell her where the Barbarian was, and they'd see how much longer he could take. He started screaming loudly and choking while Yuna shouted that she'd contacted the Hunters Association. Running around the corner, she saw her father being strangled and was terrified. She looked into the demon's eyes and thought, wait, could she really help even without a contract with the constellation? If she interfered now, it would only end in a senseless death. She could fight if only her constellation hadn't terminated their contract. She'd trained all day and was exhausted too. If even her father couldn't defeat this demon, what chance did she have? Maybe she should wait for the Hunters Association? Her father turned to her and looked her in the eyes, then smiled and whispered that everything was fine, Yuna. Let her take care of herself, his daughter. The demon declared that if he refused to answer, he would have to die, a pathetic human. Just then, he coughed, but Yuna launched an attack. The monster wondered when she had managed to get there. Furious, Yuna screamed and struck a blow, knocking the demon back. She rushed to her father. He apologized for dragging her into the situation and urged her to retreat, saying the opponent was too strong for her. She replied that she would fight, and that she was the one who should be apologizing. She promised herself that she would not lose her resolve again. She swore to seize the next opportunity, not to run away just because she was afraid. She had enough of making excuses to give up. She clenched her fist and screamed that she would never do this again. And at that moment, a system appeared in front of her and announced the constellation Blue Rose Spearman, Throat of Determination. This honors hearts that refuse to break in the face of fear. The Blue Rose Spearman constellation offered Yuna a permanent contract. Now the heir to the Blue Dragon clan, she would never again let doubts break her. The demon realized it was a curse, as she was supposed to forge a contract with the constellation now. She declared that she had ruined her fun and that she would kill her right here. She pounced on Yuna, who deftly avoided her attack, and the demon couldn't understand how she was doing it. Yuna used her piercing spear and completely destroyed the monster. Meanwhile, Wolfgang shouted at the demon, "Where is he? Tell him to come down." Volcanus shouted loudly that he would receive a reward. Wolfgang approached him and punched the monster, which sent it flying. At that moment, the car carrying Manhuas stopped abruptly, and she declared that this couldn't be happening. There was definitely no sign of demons. The demons roared loudly. A bright beam of light passed between them, and Yunha didn't know what to do. At that moment, rocks began to rain down from the sky, and the city began to crumble. Yunha covered her head when a building collapsed on her car and screamed. No, she was terrified, but at that moment she apologized to Wolfgang, and he asked again, "What are you apologizing for?" It would be better if she told him why she followed him if she was so weak. Unha replied that she followed him to report the situation, and that demons had appeared simultaneously in 3 places, one here in Seoul, another in Paju, which is nearby, and another a little further away in Daejeon. He realized that, as Yeren had said, their intelligence network had definitely improved. It would be very useful to use this in battle. Wolfgang asked her to tell him based on this information, the vice chairman of the Hunters Association. Where should he go? Meanwhile, in the underworld, Devil House was angry that Vulcanus had been destroyed, the useless fool. He clearly ordered him to lure the barbarians to the underworld. No matter, there are still 2 left. If they can somehow drag the barbarians into the underworld, the advantage will be his. His power doesn't manifest in places without sun. When Yuna used the forgiving spear, she destroyed the monster, who couldn't understand how a human could do such a thing. Yuna realized her abilities were working, and this was a great opportunity. She would do it again, and at that moment, there was a bright flash of light, followed by silence. Yuna exhaled and wondered if using the power of the constellation was really exhausting her so much. But no matter, the demon had also taken damage, and she could handle it. The demon grew angry and shouted that she was a bug, then pushed off the ground and pounced on Yuna. She didn't understand what it was, and the monster said, okay, she will praise her, that wretched little creature. Just think, she forced her to take on this form. She thought, this can't be happening. How are they supposed to kill this demon? At that moment, the demon screamed at her to die, and they struggled. Unha became angry and screamed loudly, trying to destroy her opponent, but realized she was too late when she saw a bright beam of light above her. Suddenly, the monster was restrained. This was the work of the association. The monster didn't understand what this was. The boy came to the center and announced that he had come to catch the villains. A secret royal inspector had arrived. She didn't understand. Who are they? He replied that he was a C-rank hunter and currently Jinwan's manager from the MUA agency. He came to sign the hunter contract but hurried here when he saw the demon. She asked again, what? It was dangerous, and he should step back. This wasn't something a C-rank hunter could handle. The guy replied that everything was fine because his constellation manifested its power depending on the enemy's aggression. When the guy used this power, the monster didn't understand what kind of power it was. The more power he released, the more it suppressed him. The guy exclaimed that now was the time. Yuna rushed to attack. She used the last knot spell and shouted that this was the end. Demon. The monster opened its mouth and said that this was an enemy who was bound and unable to move. To think she had gotten so close. Let her die. At that moment, the man cried out in fear. No, his summoned creatures wouldn't have enough time to block this. Her blood spilled, and she froze and began to fall to the ground. Her father has one final request for the constellation. Please grant it the strength to protect his daughter, even if it costs him his own life. At that moment, the system reported that the constellation nods in recognition of contractor Sonyon's resolve, and sensing Sonyon's imminent death, mourns. Constellation Spearman Blue Rose steals Sonyon's authority, and Blue Rose's last ember grants power beyond all limits until the contractor's life force burns out completely. A moment later, he struck the monster with such force and protected Yuna, who had been spilt with her father's blood. Sonyon said that she must take care of herself and was destroyed. Sometime later, the boy ran up to her and asked if she was okay. Yuna was horrified when she saw her father's death, and the boy shouted at her that it was dangerous and suggested she wait until the smoke cleared. The monster said that it had just sacrificed its own life, but what a pity. One person is not enough to kill it, whether there is a barbarian or not. She'll kill them all first. At that moment, the monster realized it needed to wait a bit when it saw someone nearby. This was the man Lord Devilhouse had mentioned. Wolfgang had already arrived to help, and the monster didn't understand how a human could possess such an aura. She should never fight this man head-on. She needed to bring him to Devilhouse. She screamed, "Gate to the underworld, Barbarian!" She needs to discuss something with him. At that moment, she suddenly fell silent when Wolfgang struck her. He's a barbarian, Wolfgang, from the wolf tribe. Not a savage, and doesn't listen to suggestions from demons. Sometime later, in the Daejeon zone where the flying winged demon appeared, this creature was destroyed by spears. The girl fell to the ground and asked, "Have they really won?" She looked at the sky with hope. It was a C-rank hunter named Kim Hee-yen. Modern Korea may be new to Wolfgang, but his enemy is not. When he finally finds the demon who cursed him, do you think revenge alone will be enough? Let me know below, and like and subscribe for the next part.